The time is now 7 p.m. and I'm reconvening to open session and calling to order the regular Board of Education meeting for Indian Prairie School District 204 on Monday, September 21st, 2020. Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rising.
Here.
Ms. Peel.
Here.
Ms. Grover.
Here.
Mr. Karubis.
Here.
Ms. Donahue.
Here.
Mr. Razak.
Here.
Ms. Deming.
Susan has indicated she lost her internet connection temporarily.
We do have a quorum. We will move on. Susan was to lead us in the pledge. Mr. Karubis, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Karubis. Our next regular Board of Education meeting will be held on Monday, October 5th. Today is a special meeting in which we have a budget hearing. By state law, we need to begin the budget meeting promptly at 7:05. Since it's 7:02, there might be some minutes here of some silence, but perhaps I think we could probably get it in. Ms. Grover, can you do the board salute?
Sure. This is exciting. The National Merit Scholarship Corporation announced 46 students from District 204 that have been identified as semifinalists in the 66th Annual National Merit Scholarship Program. Matia Valley had 9 students, Negro Valley had 25, and Waubonsie Valley had 12 students identified as the semifinalists. These academically talented high school seniors have an opportunity to continue in the competition for more than 7,000 national merit scholarships worth more than $30 million that will be offered next spring. Merit scholars are selected on the basis of their skills, accomplishments, and potential for success in rigorous college studies. Congratulations to all these 204 students and good luck as the scholarship competition moves forward.
Thank you, Ms. Grover. We still have about a minute and a half. As a point of order, given that many of our constituents listen for the COVID update, if there's no objection, I would like to move the COVID update discussion up after we approve the consent agenda. Do I hear anyone opposed? Thank you. The time is finally 7:05, and I'm calling to order the budget hearing. It's a time when if the public has comment, they can make such comment, and we also hear from our business manager. No one has signed up for public comment in regards to our budget, so I will turn this over to Mr. Strang.
Good evening, board members. Thank you, Board President Razak. Tonight is the final process in adopting our spending plan for fiscal year 2021. This is a process that started back in January when we began to build our financial forecast. We've had several updates through the spring, and then in summer had a draft budget. Last month, you approved a tentative budget. This budget plan tonight is the same budget that you approved tentatively a month ago. Mr. Shipley, our comptroller, will be assisting me with the presentation tonight. Next slide, please. We will go over the budget highlights, some of the larger aspects of what's in this spending plan. You'll look at the operating funds, non-operating funds, and then our final steps in the budget, which is submitting it to the county clerks and the state. Next slide, please. Our revenue by source, this is nothing new to you board members, but what you can see is that we have three primary sources of revenue. Our state sources, which are in purple, our federal sources in the light blue, and our local sources, which are the line graph that go up. What you can immediately notice is that our local sources is the one source of revenue that continues to go up, and it's the only source that's really reliable. You can see the bump in our state sources in 2019. That was due to evidence-based funding. And you can see in fiscal year 21, you can see that our state sources has declined a little bit. And that's because of the COVID-19 outbreak and the stress on the state and our thoughts that we will not receive all 4 of our categorical payments from the state of Illinois. You could also see the federal sources in 2021 that does go up slightly, and that is a reflection of the CARES grant, which we were awarded. Next slide, please. Revenue comparison by fund. Our education fund is clearly our largest fund, and you can see that that increased in fiscal year 2021, and that is predominantly salary and benefit increases, as well as the consumer price increase on our goods which we purchase. The educational fund is our largest fund, and that is the fund that supports the instruction of the schools. You can see operations and maintenance, debt services pretty much flat, transportation, IMRF, and Social Security. We have a capital projects fund, which is very small, a small working cash fund, and tort. We do not have fire protection and safety. We have never had that fund. This distribution of funds is consistent with our budget in past fiscal years. Next slide, please. When you look at the distribution of the funds over the years and expenditures, you can see that like the other slide graph, education is our largest and the one that continues to grow. You can see in fiscal year 2021 that our operations and maintenance fund is slightly smaller, and that's because we had to balance our budget, and we unfortunately balanced our budget by reducing our capital expenditures on the repairs of our buildings. You can also see that the transportation fund is slightly larger than it is in fiscal year 20, and that's because we've seen increases in our contracted expenses as the economy was in better shape and more folks are now being recruited to drive for Amazon. The cost to retain our bus drivers has gone up. Next slide, please. Mr. Shipley.
So with that, presenting tonight's budget, here are a handful of highlights. First, this is a balanced budget consistent with district goal number 3. This budget does support the current return to school plan in its current form and maintains flexibility to support our educational plan throughout the rest of this year. This budget reflects current staffing levels, union agreements, and vendor contracts. Those are the staffing levels that will be discussed later tonight in the human resources update. And then finally, as Jay already mentioned, we're relying exclusively on non-operating funds to support capital improvements this year. In the past several years, we've been able to split those expenditures between non-operating and our operations and maintenance fund. But in order to balance this year's budget, we are relying exclusively on the non-operating funds for those capital needs. Next slide, please. So presented here is the budget summary for those 6 operating funds of the district. This is consistent with the graphs that Jay just showed you. And the budget presented here, as Jay already mentioned, is the same as the tentative budget presented last month's board meeting. In total, we are projecting a balanced budget with projected excess of revenue over expenditures of $946,000. You can see that in the total column towards the bottom of the chart here. The projected fund balance as a percentage of revenues is projected to be 32.46% at June 30th, 2021. This is consistent with board policy 4.20 on fund balance, which requires a percentage of at least 25%. As we have previously discussed, this budget does show some surpluses and deficits across all funds. However, it leaves each of the 6 operating funds with a positive fund balance as of June 30th, 2021. Next slide, please. Here's the summary financial information for the 2 non-operating funds of the district. First, we have the debt service fund, which represents the bond payments the district must make on our general obligation bonds. These are the bonds and the funds that were used to construct our schools throughout the 1990s and 2000s. The revenue to pay off these bonds is exclusively property tax revenue. Next, we have the capital projects fund, which funds the critical infrastructure needs of the district. We've budgeted $3 million for current capital expenditures. As we've covered with the board in the past, this is less than ideal amount. This is less than what the district's been recommended to spend to pay for deferred maintenance and other critical capital needs. However, we believe it's a responsible amount, recognizing that the non-operating fund is going to be the exclusive source of capital projects funding for the foreseeable future. So this is really a direct reflection of the COVID-19 pandemic and one of the challenges that it has caused to our financial situation. Next slide, please. Just wanted to highlight really quickly the schedule for the debt service expenditures going out to fiscal year 2027. As mentioned, these are all payments are funded exclusively with property tax revenues. You can see that the payments are going to maintain relatively consistent through 2026. Then it'll be approximately half in 2027. And then the payments will go away starting with fiscal year 2028. At that time, these bonds will be fully retired and paid off. All bonds are fixed interest rates at really low interest rates. Combination of the interest rate environment we are in now and have been in the past, and also the fact that the district is tax exempt. So all these principal and interest rates are predictable and known. As you can see, we are getting to a point where we have 6 more years of paying these bonds at the current level, 1 more year at about half level, and then the bonds will be paid off. Next slide, please. We recognize the challenge of the current financial environment, both before and after the COVID-19 pandemic. This district has seen many financial challenges, especially when compared to our comparable districts. We've covered these numbers in previous months, but here's a quick summary of how Indian Prairie compares with our 7 other comparable districts in some key financial metrics. So first, you can see that we have the lowest revenue per pupil by over $1,000 compared to our next nearest comparable district. Under the state's evidence-based funding formula, which calculates an adequacy percentage unique to each district, we have the lowest adequacy percentage, and again, that's lower by over 12% compared to the next nearest district. This is in contrast to our tax rate, which is the 3rd highest property tax rate among our 8 comparable districts. So we recognize the challenges that the district faces, but we believe, as we've covered in previous months, that the district will continue to operate lean and mean compared to some of our comparable districts. And quite frankly, we have to when looking at these revenue per pupil numbers and our current tax rate compared to the other districts. Next slide. So with that said, that concludes our budget presentation for this evening. We do have on the agenda for the board to approve the 2021 budget later to this evening. Our auditors are continuing their review of fiscal year 2020. They're in their final week of audit work this week, and so we hope to have final 2020 numbers available to present the board in the near future. In the fall, starting here shortly, Jay and I will work to on the 2020 levy, and we'll begin the process of putting that together and having it ready for the board's approval at the December board meeting. As Jay mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, this really is an annual process that goes almost all calendar year round. So we will begin financial planning for fiscal year 2022 shortly after that levy is adopted, and we'll be presenting probably our first forecast early in the winter for fiscal year 2022. So with that said, Jay and I are available to answer any questions the board might have on tonight's presentation.
Questions or comments from the board? Go ahead.
You go back to slide 10. So a lot of people might not be attending our previous board meetings to hear about our budget. So I just want to point out a couple other pieces of data associated with our district. So when you look at us compared to the other 7, we have the lowest spending per pupil, so lowest revenue, but also lowest spending per pupil. We are below the state average. Our pupil to administration ratio is the highest, meaning we have the fewest number of administrators for our students. And our class size is the highest of our comparable districts. And all of those are also above or below the state average, whichever way you're looking at it, if it's a low metric or a high metric. We also, in our teacher salaries, which our salary is about 80% of our budget, are number 7 out of 8, meaning 8 being the lowest, we're number 7. So we're not spending a lot of money on, lots of teachers, lots of expensive salaries. And, I guess people would look at this and say, why is our property tax rate the 3rd highest? So Matt, if you could share a few words about that, I think it's important for people to understand.
Sure. Again, as we've covered in prior meetings, all the districts covered here levy property taxes under what's known as the Property Tax Extension Limitation Act, or PTAL. That's been the state law regarding property taxes since the early 1990s. So we're limited in how much we can levy each year by the Consumer Price Index. And we're really limited. That number grows or doesn't grow independent of class sizes or student count or anything that really reflects what's going on at the district. So as a district, compared to some of our other districts, we're more dense with our student counts for residential housing. We have more residential than commercial or industrial property than some of our comparable districts. So commercial industrial generates property tax revenue without generating students. And the final piece that we covered a little bit tonight is we are still making some pretty significant debt service payments related to the construction of our schools in the 1990s and early 2000s. So there are districts included in here, Naperville, District 203 being one, that does not levy any property taxes to pay off debt service. So at least for the foreseeable future, we'll still have a portion of that tax rate going to debt service, which while we needed the funds to build the buildings in the 1990s and 2000s, unfortunately, that's not money that's going directly to our classroom right now.
I also would say percent adequacy. I think we've talked about that a number of times, but I'll repeat it here because it never hurts to repeat this. Adequacy, if you're at 100% adequate in the state, that means that you are able to fund all of the required activities and courses and functions that are required of a school district. So us being at 80% adequacy means we are 20% short of having funding to cover all of those items. Correct?
That's
Correct.
absolutely correct.
Absolutely correct. And that is a calculation that takes into account all the unique demographic factors of the district. So That's not using like a flat cost per pupil across all districts. That adjusts for the unique needs of our district, whether that's having our low income population, our special education or IEP population, or our English language learner population. That attempts to adjust for that as well. So that's really been a relatively recent change to the funding formula, but it helps make sure that when we're comparing districts, we're kind of adjusting that revenue or cost per pupil to the specific needs of the district too.
Thank you. Other questions? My only question, and I'm assuming that we did not receive any written response in terms of the budget. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Razak.
Thank you. Hearing no other questions, I do need a motion to come out of the budget hearing. Please identify yourself, make the motion, and I need a second.
Susan Deming, I move that we come out of the budget hearing process.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Justin Carubus, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Jeannie, you need to call the roll.
Ms. Deming,
Aye.
Mr. Carubus,
Yes.
Ms. Peel,
Aye.
Ms. Donahue,
Aye.
Ms. Grover,
Yes.
Mr. Rising,
Yes.
Mr. Razak.
Aye. Motion passes. We are now out of the budget hearing. Once again, the board has moved the COVID update after the consent agenda item. So I'm just making people aware that we have moved our COVID update after we approve the consent agenda items. With that, it's time now to move to our student representative report. It's the first one of the school year. We're pleased to have Emily Shah from Waubonsee Valley High School joining us today. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, my name is Emily and I'm proud to represent Waubonsee Valley High School. As a warrior, I'm proud to report that our Waubonsee community continues to thrive and provide many outstanding experiences to our students. In regards to clubs and activities, the start of the year was a challenge as we were bringing students to campus for Chromebook exchanges, textbook pickups, and then navigating news from the Illinois Department of Health. However, even with all of our growing pains, we are up and running and things are going as well as they can. We've just completed our first ever virtual curriculum night. Our community has been very gracious with the move to the virtual platform for many of our needs. Clubs and activities are up and running, and we're pleased to say that nearly all of our clubs are operating in a virtual practice. We are able to preserve student opportunities during this precarious time, and we are actually advertising our clubs and activities like crazy via social media. We are excited for this new venue. Student Council has determined our Spirit Week themes, and we look to take homecoming virtual as well as during the week of October 5th through 9th. Unfortunately, we won't be able to do our Warriors on the Run 5K. However, we've got a senior drive-through planned, and that's just evidence of how we are trying to do things differently. In terms of athletics, despite many fall sports being moved to the spring, Warriors have still managed to participate in athletics in a safe manner. The sports that have been practicing and competing are girls and boys golf, girls tennis, girls swimming, and girls and boys cross country. Even during these unusual times, these Warriors have shown commitment to their sport and their community. Spectators are not allowed inside for swimming competitions and are allowed on a limited basis on our outdoor facilities. Brian Weinsack, a media production teacher at Waubonsee Valley, and his WVTV media department have played a vital role in bringing our athletics to our Waubonsee community. WVTV has streamed all of our girls swimming meets and all of our boys and girls cross country events that we have hosted on our campus. In addition, WVTV has covered our golf and tennis matches. The WV Athletic Department would like to take the time to thank Brian and his WVTV crew for all of their efforts. Recently, the IHSA has allowed our other sports to participate in a 20 contact dates in 20 contact dates. A majority of our sports are taking advantage of this opportunity and are also doing this in a safe manner. Our fall athletics will come to an end on October 24th, and our winter sports are scheduled to begin on November 16th. The Waubonsie Valley Athletic Department would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our Warrior athletes and their families for their patience as we continue to navigate through these interesting times. In addition, we would like to thank our coaches for their continued commitment in making this fall season run smoothly and creating a safe environment for our student athletes. Moving on to academics. We've made the move to remote learning in a very decent fashion. Many of our students report that our processes are smooth. They're growing into the new method of communication and support and doing the best that they can. While this news is good to hear, we are still hearing from students that they're missing actually being at school and in the halls. On September 23rd, we'll be administering the SAT to our senior students. They'll be on campus in socially distanced room from 7:10 until 1:30. We are looking forward to having students on campus. That's all for the Waubonsie Valley Board Report. Thank you, and as always, go Warriors.
And thank you, Emily. What a nice and detailed report. Thank you so much. As you know, boards of education are bound by strict provisions of the Open Meetings Act. As board president, I have determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent due to the pandemic. With the onset of COVID-19, some of the OMA guidelines have been relaxed. Specifically, board members do not have to be physically present. As a result, video or audio conferencing is allowed. Boards are encouraged to provide video or audio access to the meetings in order that the public may monitor those meetings. All other Open Meeting Act requirements remain in place. A quorum of the board must participate. All meetings must be open to the public except any portion of the meeting that is closed for one or more reasons of the act. The meeting must include an opportunity for public comment. And requirements relating to meeting notices, agendas, and minutes remain applicable. Please know that our board will continue to meet these requirements in this most difficult time. As we move through the agenda, it's time for public comment for non-agenda items. We do not have any public comment for non-agenda items. So we will now move to our consent agenda and superintendent report. We will start with the superintendent report.
Thank you, Mr. Razak, members of the board and Indian Prairie community. Knowing we have a lot tonight, I'm going to keep my comments very short. September 15th to October 15th is National Hispanic Heritage Month. It is a time across the nation when we celebrate the great contributions that more than 60 million Hispanic Americans have provided to our culture and society. There is a rich history of how Hispanic Americans have contributed to science, arts, literature, education, and our overall society. Our schools in Indian Prairie have a rich history of celebrating our diverse culture, and I'm positive they are commemorating Hispanic Heritage Month now. As I visit schools each week, I could easily speak about great things happening at all of our schools. Tonight, I just want to take a moment to talk about our STEPS program. Last week, I was able to spend a little time at STEPS to see their program. STEPS, which stands for Supportive Training Experiences Post-Secondary, provides vocational skills development, on-the-job training, and job coaching to some of our students. Last week, I saw the principal, Ms. Maloney, teachers and teaching assistants engaged with more than 20 students. I was able to meet and talk with various students. One student, Michael, recently had his birthday over the weekend. I was so impressed by the staff and the work they are doing directly with the children at STEPS, the engagement of the STEPS children with me. The staff, they all care. The attention and the commitment they put forward was wonderful. They all exemplify what I ask all of our staff to do, and that is their best. Because we will be talking about reopening a school later, I will end my comments now. Back to you, Mr. Razak.
Thank you, Dr. Talley. We now move to the consent agenda items. Please identify yourself as you make your motion or second. I need a motion for the approval of consent agenda items D through J.
I move, this is Lori Donahue. I move that the board approve consent agenda items D through J.
There is a motion. Do I have a second?
This is Kathy Peel, second.
There is a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Donahue,
Aye.
Ms. Peel,
Aye.
Mr. Razak,
Aye.
Ms. Deming,
Aye.
Ms. Grover,
Yes.
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Mr. Rising.
Yes.
Motion passes. As mentioned previously, we are going to move to our COVID update. Before we do have public comment. And so now it is time for public comment for agenda items. 30 minutes is allowed for public comment, and each person is limited to 3 minutes. When addressing the board, we ask that you respect the confidentiality and safety of our students and school district personnel. We also ask that those addressing the board be cognizant that this is an open meeting and is available to all age groups, and as such, ask that you consider who the audience members are and keep comments age appropriate. Public comment represents the voice and the opinion of the speaker. There will be no feedback from board members during the meeting, but follow-up will be provided by an administrator as appropriate. Our first speaker today is Kelly A.
Thank you to the board for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. As a full-time working mother of two with my oldest son attending first grade at Maywatts Elementary, I want to commend our district teachers for stepping up to the plate to make what we all knew would be a challenging school year into the most positive virtual learning experience possible thus far. I'm sure it's safe to say that most guardians have encountered their fair share of technical hiccups and emotional adjustments as virtual learning has begun. But I'm here tonight to respectfully ask those in our community who are already throwing in the towel and advocating for in-person learning to hit the pause button. Our children have been e-learning for a little over 2 weeks. Looking at some of these posts on social media, you would have thought that we've been at this for months versus weeks. I ask that we all come together to give our teachers a fair shot at adjusting to essentially relearning how to do their jobs outside of the classroom before we judge the overall effectiveness of virtual learning. Before we force our teachers to pick their health over their careers, and before the inevitable scenario occurs where we find our kids back on Zoom a month after schools prematurely reopen. Tonight, I plead with those of you who have closed the door on virtual learning to open it back up, if just a crack, and to do your absolute best to work with your teachers, to work with your kids, and to give the virtual learning experience that we're all in together an actual chance before you dismiss it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Our next speaker is Patty W.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, just want to make sure you could hear me. My name is Patty. I have attended several virtual board meetings over the last several months, mostly since school went remote. Shame on me for becoming involved in these monthly meetings due to the pandemic. I am beyond frustrated at what I'm hearing, or better yet, what I am not hearing at some of these meetings. I was particularly disappointed by the last board meeting on September 8th. It started with a lot of complimenting, mostly between board members. Good job, and what a huge undertaking, were two phrases that I heard quite a bit. While I agree it was and is a huge undertaking, I was confused. If I didn't have students in the district, I would have been led to believe, based on the first 15 minutes of the meeting, that remote learning was amazing, working, and successful. I also heard all 7 board members say, we want to get these kids back in school ASAP. What I did not hear from any of you was a plan, a time frame, or even what metrics you would be using to do just that. However, I did hear 2 parents who spoke firsthand of challenges facing their students as they embark on remote learning. This is the narrative I related to. I heard everything from inappropriate language to pornography images on Zoom to the heartbreaking account of a mother who has 3 students in the district whose children are struggling, one with an IEP, and how she is stretched every single day to try to teach and help her child and children, and she can't. She's heartbroken and frustrated and worried. And frankly, as a mom, my heart broke for her as I listened to her story. It is clear to me that nothing about this is normal. This is not a normal way for kids to learn or to attend school, but we all need to do better and we all need to be accountable. While it is noble to try to make technology piece work, the simple fact is this: the 7 board members represent an entire district. Regardless of how each one of you feels about the virus, you have a job to do, and you have been elected by parents of District 204 to represent everyone, not just those who want remote learning, but also those who want the hybrid option. It is your job and duty to be advocating for all students, not just those that fall within your own personal beliefs. The CDC, Illinois State Board of Education, the Department of Health, all have said that Illinois schools can be in school, or even a hybrid version in phase 4. We are in phase 4. Our positivity rate is low enough to make this happen, and there is no good reason that our school district should not be actively making plans to get all students back in school. I read an article this weekend. The headline was District 211 preparing to restore in-person learning October 26th. Were you aware that District 211 is the 2nd largest high school district in Illinois? They have more high school students than we do in District 204. They have a plan to get their high school kids back, but we don't. And they are so secure in their plan that they even told their parents to get ready and even put it in the newspaper.
Mr. Razak, the speaker's time has expired.
Patty, could you have a sentence or 2, please? The 3 minutes has expired. Can you finish in a sentence or 2, please?
I will, thank you. Rather than keep saying we want to get our kids back to school as soon as possible, let's change the dialogue to here's our plan, here's the timeline, here's how it will look. Your lack of planning and communication keeps a lot of us up at night. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Our next speaker is Kathy H. Adam, are we able to get Kathy on?
Kathy has the floor, or she needs to unmute her phone. There should be some instructions coming over to her shortly.
Thank you.
Good evening. I lift my voice this evening for all of those students who need to get back to class, full-time and in person. There is no longer a medical need for children to be out of school. The data is very clear about this. It is dishonest to count active cases as a reason to keep children out of school. New active cases are meaningless in the broader context. The important metrics is hospitalizations and deaths, and by that metric, we have no reason not to send our children back to school. I am far more worried about cases of depression, social isolation, and suicides. I'm worried about our special needs students and other vulnerable students. I am worried about domestic tensions exacerbated by our current remote learning environment. It ultimately is up to the board whether the children go back to school. The superintendent answers to the board, not the other way around. Please note, we need leaders on the board right now. Come 2021, I, along with many others, will be looking at candidates for the board that proactively looked for ways to get kids back to school as soon as was possible. We'll be looking for leaders on that board. Please note also, this is not a knock against our teachers. I have seen many of my child's teachers make the absolute best of a difficult situation with kindness and a sense of humor. They have done an amazing job, but their job is to teach. Please start planning now to bring the kids back to school by the end of October at the latest. Thank you for your attention to this important matter.
Thank you, Kathy. We are now going to move to that discussion item, which is the COVID update, and Dr. Talley will be providing the update today.
Thank you, Mr. Razak, members of the board, and the Indian Prairie community. Today, we completed our 11th day of virtual instruction. As we continue this modality of learning, I continue to be so proud of our teachers, principals, teaching assistants, and our students in the Herculean work that they are doing to have this rigorous program for our students. Tonight, in our COVID update, we will continue to share where we are and continue to let you know our plans for starting in-person learning in our schools. Since our decision to announce virtual learning at the August 10th Board of Ed meeting, we have always said that we will continue to examine conditions in the area and look to bring students back to school at the end of the first quarter. We have not wavered from that message. In our approach, we have to be very thoughtful and careful in creating our plan. We know that there are varying opinions out there about our current virtual program. As an example, here is one paragraph one parent sent. I want to say remote learning is going wonderfully for our family. I've also heard many positive feedback from other parents surprised at how well it is going. Students and teachers are engaged and academic material is well presented. It's very organized and kids are held to a higher standard. On the other end of the continuum, I have also received an email similar to this one. Not one parent or student or teacher for that matter I have talked with is enjoying e-learning, finding it productive, engaging, or challenging. These are parents also who were in favor of it originally. The words I've heard used, boring, this one in particular my son agrees with wholeheartedly, repetitive, confusing, technologically frustrating, and pointless. These divergent comments are from two different parents, reflect the type of messages we have received, and also reflect what our plan must respond to as we create our plan forward. Next slide, please. Our goal has remained constant since we presented our plan on August 10th. We want to ensure we have a comprehensive educational program for all students. Next slide. We are currently in our monitoring and modify part of our plan. We continually reflect upon what is happening in the schools and modify as necessary based upon the feedback we are receiving. The monitoring and modifying is happening at the individual teacher level, school level, and at the system level. Teachers continually modify what and how they are teaching based upon how students are learning in the remote model. Schools are reviewing attendance and teams of teachers are reviewing their lessons and modifying as necessary. And as a system, we are also examining what is happening and modifying as we will discuss. Next slide, please. Our framework has always been focused on ensuring health and safety of our students and staff and our community. Next slide. As we have worked to put together our plan, we have had to focus on a myriad of different areas within our framework, as you can see here. This is what has made it as complicated as it has been, but it is a challenge that we have accepted and will move forward with. Next slide. We continue to be in phase 4, or revitalization as defined by the governor. It is not until the governor moves us to phase 5 will we be able to have all students in without restrictions. It is the governor who makes that decision and not the school systems. Next slide. The one constant that we have had has been the changing information we have received. In June, we received state guidance that had been updated almost on a weekly basis. Also in June, the state had 4 regions. Later, they modified that in July, and that information was changed into 11 regions. In late August, DuPage County came out with guidance, which I will share in a minute. And finally, the CDC provided updated guidance. In all of these changes, we have worked hard to ensure our protocols match the changing guidance. I want to also thank Ms. Linda Herwalt for the work she has done as our nurse to update our guidance almost on a weekly basis as it's gone forward. Next slide. At our last board meeting, I shared where we are in our 2 counties with an infection rates. We can see here in Region 7, where we pull approximately 56% of our students, as of September 17th, our positivity rates have stayed the same, which is very good. Additionally, in Region 8, I was talking about, but now in Region 7, which includes Will County, where approximately 44% of our students reside, the rate of infection has dropped almost 3 percentage points, which is outstanding. Statewide, we see a decline as well. So overall, our metrics are looking quite good for the area. They've either dropped or held steady, which is what we want from the district standpoint. Next slide, please. As mentioned about metrics, I want to share with you what has come out from the DuPage County Health Department. This information has been shared with all of the superintendents in the area. This is to help school districts determine when in-person learning can be done and when virtual learning should be used. The information which has been shared across all of us, and we as superintendents meet on a regular basis to talk about this information. There are 3 levels of transmission: minimal, moderate, and substantial. You can see how the health department determines the levels. I will not go through each metric, but overall, we are looking at weekly county case rates, weekly test positivity, and weekly county youth cases, just to name a few of the metrics. At levels minimal and moderate, we can have in-person learning to some extent. There are more requirements to how that in-person learning looks when you are at the moderate level compared to the minimal level. At the substantial transmission level, we only can have remote learning. Next slide, please. Every week, the DuPage County comes out with transmission levels. This came out to us on Friday, and what you can see is that we are at the moderate level. Compared to last week, where the arrows were orange and pointing up, you can see that this, when this came out, the arrows are blue and pointing down, except for one, which is the weekly transmission positivity. We should be very pleased with most of the arrows going down and most of the arrows being blue. That is what we want. Next slide, please. So when we compare our enrollment from last year to this year, you can see that at the 6th day of enrollment, we had approximately 700 fewer students enrolled this year compared to last school year. It should be said that our projection for this year showed that we would have had a slight drop in enrollment anyway. Our official attendance, though, was not taken until later this school year. Our first 7 days of attendance was very promising because it was slightly higher than our attendance last year, which I think reflects the fact that our children are attending the remote learning. We did not see a drop off in attendance. And in fact, we saw it was actually just slightly better than before. Next slide, please. We have done a lot to support our online community. We've added K1 Chromebooks, something we've never had before. We increased digital resources for teachers to use with students, as well as provide instructional kits for teachers to use with their students. We have provided our teachers and staff with professional development that supports them delivering the online platform. This professional development has taken place over the summer and during the school year so far that we've been in now. One of the reasons for our delay this year was to do some additional professional development with our teachers to ensure that they were ready for online learning. And it has turned out to be very successful going forward. Next slide. As our student mentioned, we have SATs happening. We're happy to say that this is going to be occurring in our schools. These opportunities allow us to ensure that the protocols that we have put in place to support children being in school are actually working. Next week, we will have more than 1,800 students taking the SATs in our buildings. Staff will be there to proctor the assessments. Our schools have planned for the day and are excited to have the seniors in the schools. When we did this assessment earlier this year, in August, we were able to do 350 students at Neuqua Valley, and we had no problems throughout the whole assessment period. And so this is an example of us having our children in schools. Next slide. There are a myriad of safety protocols that we have in place for the students on the day of the SATs. I am not reading through all of these by any means, but I just wanted to show you that these protocols were created by the schools and they were vetted by our Health and Safety Committee to ensure that the protocols meet DuPage standards for keeping our community safe. We want to ensure that when the children come in and when they leave, we have done everything possible to reduce the chance of anyone testing positive for COVID based upon our actions in the schools. We will use these standards throughout after the testings are done in order to ensure other events are happening in the school correctly and safely for all of our children and our staff. Next slide. We want to dispel the belief that we do not have children in our schools. Last week, 24 of our schools had students in their buildings. As I mentioned earlier, our STEPS program has had more than 20 students attending the program on a regular basis, and their teachers were there with them throughout. We've had approximately 60 students who received special education services who were in their schools last week. And we were pleased that we had more than 400 students who came in for driver's education testing at our 3 high schools. Next slide, please. In our efforts to keep our students in our school and to allow for them to come, we have, as we are required by the state, that students come to school, they must wear their face masks. We must ensure that students maintain 6 feet of social distancing, and this means that our classrooms will have no more than 12 students. And then also parents will also need to self-certify that students are healthy. And self-certification, on the next slide, you can see what parents will have to go through to make sure that their child is safe. This must be done by all parents every day for children coming to school, and this is a requirement from the state of Illinois. It is not a requirement of just Indian Prairie School District. Next slide, please. One question that people have often raised in their email is protocols that we use to determine quarantining and exclusion. The Illinois Department of Health has provided the guidance that you see here on the screen that we have used to create our protocol procedures. In the procedures, they have 5 levels described as to what needs to happen when there is a positive case and the response from the school. I am not going to go through each case one by one, but I will say that whenever this is a case, our nurses are instrumental in contact tracing and working with the health department to determine our responses. As I mentioned, Ms. Linda Herwalt has been instrumental in doing this. And so when there is a positivity case, she will use this as the way to determine what has to happen as she works with the health department. And as they're asking her questions, that's when we determine whether we have to shut down part of the building, not shut down any part of the building, or shut the whole building down for deep cleaning. It varies based upon the scenario that we have to present to the health department. And that is why our protocols are so important. And that's why we are testing them daily with our students who are coming in right now to ensure the success. I mentioned earlier, last time we had a board meeting, that we had more than 700 of our English language learners students who were tested in the summertime. Not one of those situations did we have an issue of someone testing positive. Why? Because the protocols were in place and our staff using those protocols were able to connect with students one-on-one and do those testing appropriately. Next slide. And so the question that people have asked has been, what is the plan for having children come back to school? So I will say something that I've said since August 10th, that I said at the very beginning of this presentation, and that is our plan has always been that students will be back in school at the end of the first quarter / beginning of the second quarter, depending upon how you look at it. That has been our plan, and it is something that we've not wavered from. What we have to do is thread the needle and carefully knit together our plan. We remain focused on supporting our students who are most vulnerable, to include our students who receive special education services, our English language learners, and our pre-K students, and our first grade students, and our kindergarten students. We have some schools that will be piloting in teams of students to a school, for example, first grade or second grade. These pilots should start within the next 3 weeks. In those cases, the teachers for a grade level will teach in person, as well as Zoom out to those students who require remote learning. These pilot programs will allow us to examine our protocols, tweak them as necessary, so we're ready for when we bring our students in. For example, I was visiting a school district the other day that is doing in-person learning, and we really need to examine very carefully arrival and dismissal because of the number of parents who will be driving their kids to schools. That was very important for us to think about as we go forward. And so we really want to use this opportunity of these pilots to make sure our protocols are in place and that they are making sense and making sure that people are safe and secure. We know the importance of receiving feedback that helps inform the work we are doing. After tonight's Board of Ed meeting, a survey is going out to the families, asking them some questions related to our remote work. We need families to complete that survey for each child they have in the district. We know that for some families, based upon emails I have read, they love what is happening. Other families do not like the remote learning. For some families, it varies based upon the grade level of the child. Your information will help us fine-tune our plan to return to schools. I want to be very clear, however. Families also need to understand that we will offer the remote plan as well as required by state guidance. Next slide, please. Each school district is in a different stage of moving to in-person learning. I am on 2 calls a week with superintendents in DuPage County area. We talk about each other's plans and the process being used in the district to move to in-person learning. We have said all along that we would start our plan at the end of the first quarter. We have not wavered from that time because we do not want a moving target. We know parents need time to plan, and rather than have a changing target, we have wanted to be consistent. Please remember that many districts also said the same thing about the end of the first quarter. When quarters end depends upon when they began. We delayed our beginning so we have a later end of the first quarter than other schools. What we are doing, though, is bringing some students in earlier to pilot our plan and ensure we have considered all aspects before we have a very large number of students in person. Finally, as I mentioned before, as required by Illinois requirements, we will offer the remote learning for those families that require that modality of learning. We are committed to student academic and social emotional learning. And we are committed to ensure the safety of our students, our staff, and our community. And now I'll take any questions, or my cabinet also will be here to answer any questions that you may have.
Comments or questions from the board?
This is Mark. I'll go really quick. Thank you, Dr. Talley, and for the continued work that you do with administration, with building leaders, with staff, and everything else. Like I've said since August 10th, I supported this plan that we started out with. I think it's a great plan. Did we know there was going to be bumps in the road? Absolutely. These things don't turn out always the way you expect them to turn out. And we're getting through those, and I compliment the IT staff for all they've done as well. And really, I'll just have one question, but I'll just briefly preface it as, we all value the online learning. And, it is extremely important that we offer that until we can get to a phase 5, if that ever comes. So that will always be there. And I think we all recognize that and value that for our students and their families, and also for staff as well. But we also see, the schools, private schools and many public schools that either have been back or are starting to go back or creating some type of timeline. And it's important that I think we mention too that we are a very large district. So this isn't, I think Mr. Karubas mentioned this really well last time, is this is not something you can just flip a switch and turn on. The struggles we have is the size of our district, and also, frankly, the size of our classes in our district. That goes back to the earlier budget discussion of what we have revenue-wise from local resources. So, as a board member, I look to get an understanding from administration, superintendent, because they are the day-to-day operations that we as a board take guidance from, and how they're making these things happen. And I value that that guidance that they give us very much. And that's why the board is there as well, for those checks and balances, and to move things forward in the district, no matter what the topic is, right? So, I know there are a lot of families that are enjoying remote learning. I know there are families that are struggling with remote learning. I'll just say personally, with my daughter, she's doing okay. She's surviving, but she also wants to be back. So I guess my question to you, Dr. Talley, is, we talk about getting back, and we've all talked about that, and I maybe talked about it a little too much last meeting. But I guess my question for you is at our next board meeting, October 5th, can we start to see some type of timeline of what this looks like? Because I think parents want to understand how this is going to work, when this is going to work. There are some that obviously, like we talked about, this won't work for, and they will need to continue to do remote learning. But I think a lot of parents are curious to see what that looks like, instead of just plans to get back, right? So that's my question. Thanks.
So Mark, yes, totally understand your question. And at the October 5th, it will be easy for us to talk about such things as when the survey, the results of our survey, also when parents will have to register and let us know their decision for remote or virtual. They will be able to let us know that information in this survey tonight that comes out, but then also a final one which commits them to something will also be in that timeline. And then of course, when we'll start the hybrid program, as I mentioned, at the end of the month. Those things are very easy for us to talk about in a timeline for you. And I will also say this, you know, it is very true with anything you do in a school, you have bumps along the road. From when you went to half day to full day kindergarten, when you change any requirements for students to learn for graduation, any type of thing is going to have its issues. What I've always said is that it's about continuous improvement. How do we modify, as I mentioned earlier, to address the concerns and then to make changes so that those concerns are addressed, definitely.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
So I have, I want to thank you for the, excuse me, boy, I'm losing my voice. The 11 days of remote learning. I believe everyone is trying to do their best. And I hope that what came across today in your presentation was that, you know, the district is hard at work, not only trying to improve our remote learning and make changes where needed, but also at the same time actively looking at how we will be bringing students in by the end of the quarter, and are in fact testing that in different pockets right now. So I really want to make sure everybody got that information from your presentation. And also I want to stress to the community how important it is for all of us to work together to make sure that we continue to keep those rates down, and that when you are offered an opportunity to send your child into school, that if they're sick, you make sure they don't come to school. I've seen report after report in the news about situations where that hasn't occurred. So, you know, the community has to, again, work together. And if your child is in a situation where they've been exposed, that they cooperate with contact tracing, because we've also seen instances of that not happening. So, you know, thank you for all of the work that you're doing on the current remote environment and the work you're doing to plan for the students to come back into work. And I look forward to the community helping us to make sure that this all works together. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Donahue. Other questions or comments?
I have a question, President Razak. Dr. Talley, I think one thing that would help the parents perhaps with their survey is, I know some parents fear that remote learning might be different from in-person. Could you just talk to that, perhaps how the students would be learning the same things if they were remote or in person?
Yes, so with remote learning, the students would be learning the same. One of the ways in which we are truly looking at is for the teachers who are in person to also teach remotely at the same time. Other districts have moved that forward, so that would be a possibility for us. What we have to look at will be the numbers of students who are going to do remote versus in-person. But by streaming from the classroom, it is a way that the students will be learning exactly what's going on in the classroom. Even if that doesn't happen though, the students who would be remotely taught by a remote teacher would still have the same learning that the other children would have.
Other questions?
Peel, I have just a quick question about the pilots that are going to be starting. I understood that we base that on need of the students. I'm also assuming there's got to be a matchup with the teachers that are ready to do this. So I'm just wondering how that, how those are being determined and who we're focusing on first.
So the principals are having conversations with their teachers and are looking and asking them who is ready for their children to come back into school. So it could be different grade levels that could be coming in. So for example, we have one school, I will not mention the school because I don't want the information to get out too soon. But we have one school where they were looking at several of their grade levels wanting to do that pilot. So it will vary from school to school as we examine this, but we really want to have sort of the first adopters, if you will, because they're the ones who can ensure that this is going to happen and happen well. And then also, as I mentioned, with regards to the protocols that will allow us to ensure that our protocols are in place and are making a difference, ensuring the health and safety of everybody. So principals are having these conversations. We believe that this will happen more at the elementary level than it will at the secondary level, but that's due in part to the fact that the schedule at the elementary level makes it a little bit easier for that to occur. Not saying that that won't happen at the secondary level. The high schools continue to look at bringing in their students, and middle school is also looking at that very carefully. Finally, I will say this, we're also looking at our students who receive special ed services. How can we, especially those who are in self-contained, how can we work with those students and bring them in on a couple of days a week and to support them and their needs?
Any other questions? Dr. Talley, some new information for me was the streaming from the classroom. There was some uncertainty about that in August and June, but it appears other school districts are doing it, and it appears that it's a distinct possibility for District 204. Is that correct?
It is a possibility, Mr. Razak. We will, and I think as I said, the pilots will allow us to see how that works and to iron out kinks that may be there. But it is something we are examining. Yes.
Thank you. I guess finally, I urge parents to fill out the survey. It clearly informs us and helps us plan. Like COVID, sometimes we go through a fatigue, and I'm hoping that we don't have survey fatigue. This is important information that helps us move forward. And I really hope that everyone fills that out so that we can move forward in a positive way. And if we get accurate information, it really assists us in actually bringing more kids into school if we get accurate numbers. Any other questions or comments?
President Razak, I did have a question. Dr. Talley, is as those decisions are made, are they going to be for the second quarter only, or will this be going forward for the balance of the year?
No, we'll need to examine things at the end of the first semester. So it'll be second quarter. And then at the end of the first semester, we'll examine where we are with everything and to determine if we'll continue going out in that direction. We want to be I understand parents need to plan and need to know. So we want to be careful and not upset the apple cart tremendously at the end of this first semester. But like I said, we always want to modify and monitor and modify as necessary. So we do not want to be static in our approach. So we'll see how things go, and then if things are going well, move forward with that for the second semester.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none, we're going to move on with our agenda. So we will return to the action items. And I need a motion to approve FY 2021 budget as presented.
This is Mark Rising. I will make the motion to approve the 2021 tentative budget as presented.
So I have a motion to approve the 2021 budget as presented. Is there a second?
Susan Deming, I second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rising,
Yes.
Ms. Deming,
Aye.
Ms. Grover,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Aye.
Mr. Karubis,
Yes, and as a point of clarification, this is not a tentative budget. This is the budget. So that's what I'm agreeing to.
I will I will amend my motion to say approval of the 2021 budget. Thanks, Justin.
So there is that motion. Susan, did you second that?
I second the motion for the 2021 budget.
Thank you.
Mr. Razak,
Aye.
Ms. Peel,
Aye.
Motion passes. Our next action item is the middle school math resource. We received a presentation about middle school math last board meeting. So I need a motion to approve the middle school math resource as presented.
Susan Deming, I move that we approve the middle school math resource as presented.
Is there a second?
Lori Donahue. Oops. Go ahead, Natasha.
Natasha Grover, I second it.
So I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on the middle school math resource?
I was just curious if we got any feedback, or did administration hear or get a lot of questions on after the presentation last time? And I'm not sure if the administrator could answer that.
I'm here. No, I'm sorry. There was not any real information or questions that came forward. I believe there was just one email that I remember seeing, and that was about it. But I do not know if Tara is on the line or not. If not, but as I said, I do not remember anything coming forward.
Yeah, and I think it was a pretty well done presentation last time that answered a lot of questions I think that parents may have had. So I that's probably the reason why we didn't get too much feedback. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Deming,
Aye.
Ms. Grover,
Yes.
Mr. Rising,
Yes.
Ms. Peel,
Aye.
Mr. Razak,
Aye.
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue.
Motion passes. We are now moving to our next action item, which is the approval of the equity belief statement as presented. I need a motion to approve the equity belief statement.
I move that the board, this is Lori Donahue, I move that the Board of Education approve the equity statement as presented.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Justin Karubis, second.
We have a motion and a second. I think Ms. Deming, who has been working as our lead in this endeavor, does have a PowerPoint to share. Is that correct? Here we go.
That is correct, Mr. President Razak. So I wanted to take an opportunity at our last board meeting. We had the opportunity to come to consensus on a statement, and We desire to ensure that we received feedback from a variety of constituents regarding the equity statement that we sent them. So I wanted to share some of the thoughts that we received. Next slide, please. I first wanted to make sure that everyone was familiar with the statement that we came to consensus on. This was the statement that was provided to each of the groups. We asked a variety of questions of them, and next statement, please. I'm not going to read the one that we agreed to. This is, can you go to the next? I'm not sure this is the correct. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide. These were additional statements that the board considered. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. I'm going to have to share. Somehow we do not have the, I'm not sure what happened. Somehow we do not have the correct.
I know I loaded the correct one. Adam, did you pull that from board docs?
Clayton actually is doing the screen sharing at the moment, so I'll defer to him, please.
Clayton, did you pull that from board docs?
This one was shared to me from Adam prior to the meeting. I will go to board docs and pull that one now.
Thank you.
Susan, this is the resource I believe that you had said you might use was the piece. So that's my apologies that was put.
That's okay.
Keeping you on your toes, Miss Deming.
That's all right. Okay. Here we go. Thank you. So just as a reminder, thank you so much, Clayton, for this one. Basically just reviewing, and I'm not going to read this, but we have, as a board, have committed to having an equity policy, adopting an equity policy. One of the reasons that we, again, as a reminder for our community, one of the reasons that we began looking at creating an equity statement, we looked at a variety of different districts, statewide as well as nationwide, and receiving feedback, especially in addition from ISBE. Many districts have found it helpful as they created policy and procedures to begin with an equity statement. And that statement really serves as the guidepost for much of the equity work done in the districts. Next slide, please. The only thing that I really wanted, we reviewed this before, the only thing that I really wanted to remind us is that as policies are created, many districts have indicated that it really took years to accomplish this task. One of the things that we really want to be sure with as we create our policies and procedures regarding equity, that they are ones that will allow us to embed within our district and really reinforce everything that surrounds decision-making regarding education within our district. So it's not something that we know will be able to be done overnight, and that is then reinforced by districts that have been done work on equity policy. Next slide, please. So the process that we are taking, we drafted an equity statement, we came to consensus on it. We wanted to share that statement with key constituency groups, analyze analysis of that feedback, and finalizing an equity statement, and then ensuring that that statement is included in all of our district literature and becomes the driving force for the equity work that we will continue to do in this district. Next slide, please. Again, this was the particular one that we came to consensus on. I'll just allow a minute for community and for board members to relook at. Next slide, please. So feedback, we sent it out to 18 different groups comprising of district staff, teachers, students, parent guardians, administrator principals, and district parent groups. So we tried to cover a variety of the community. We received 10 responses. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we really heard as we received the feedback, some felt that the statement encompassed all groups as it should because this district is very diverse. Regarding the statement, we in the statement recognize that this is going to be a long journey, but we need to be sure we include how will success be measured. One of the other feedback comments, the statement rings strong because the district, and it's indicative that the district has made it a mission to commit to difficult equity work, and we will actively work to remove barriers to equity. Next slide, please. Some of the things that groups really wanted us to ensure that we kept in mind as this work continues and really begins again to be embedded, and President Razak had a really nice phrase that I really appreciated, but institutionalized within our district. Some of the things that they wanted us to remember is, where is the how of the equity work? Those were one of the things that some of the groups felt that they weren't seeing. Making sure that we recognize the inclusion of all groups in equity work is a must. And I think that's something that we are all committed to doing. Some groups expressed we want to believe the district and board are committed to equity. Seeing is believing. In order to remove barriers, we must determine what barriers exist. I think that particular arena is one that, as we really get into the institutionalized and embedded work of equity, those are the conversations, those are the things that will come definitely forward in the conversations, is understanding what barriers exist now and which ones need to be removed in order that all students can succeed. And one of the things that we're committed to, and the reason that we began this is surrounding policies and procedures. But feedback received, policies and procedures should affirm social, emotional, and academic well-being. So we're very committed on the, I think the statement showed the academic side, but it was extremely important that we show social and emotional as well, part of the feedback that we received. Next slide, please. Additional feedback. Statement was missing staff demographic commitment. And again, as we begin and do the equity work, it's not just how equity impacts our students, but how it impacts our entire district. So that staff, students, administration, what's happening within the curriculum that we receive, what's happened outside in the extracurricular activities, but the feedback, they wanted to ensure that as we begin the work that we include and don't forget staff demographics. Accountability should be a part of our statement. The board must commit that all constituents will be involved, and that's something that I think we definitely have definitely included or definitely have committed to, is that it will include parents, students, staff, but as well the entire 204 community stakeholder process. And then commitment to action is critical. Honest appraisal of existing difficulties and problems must occur. And so that includes a variety of the feedback that we received. Next slide, please. So we have to make a determination. What's the statement? Is this the statement that we move forward with? We have to confirm a statement. We have to make a decision. So those are some of the discussions that we need to have this evening. But once we do have that statement confirmed, we're going to have to work with administration to determine how and who will lead us through this process. And again, this is going to be a journey. This is not an overnight process. What's the timeline? What's the board involvement with the administration and staff as this goes forward? Commitment is vital. Administration has to ensure the board is committed to ensuring that commitment takes place. And this has to be embedded in the entire work of the district. And again, as I mentioned President Razak used the term institutionalized within the district. So that's the feedback that we received, board. I think we will have some discussion, President Razak.
That's correct. So I think we need to begin to just reflect on Susan's presentation and on the statement. And I think,
can we go back to slide, I think it's slide 3 or 4, I'm sure. Oh, no. One more. Okay, thank you.
There we go, great.
This is the statement that we came to consensus on at our last meeting, or I'm sorry, back in June, and that we provided to the constituency groups.
Yes, thank you.
This is Mark. I'll make my comments pretty quick, just to get them out of the way. I actually really liked this statement that we had talked about the last time we had this discussion. If you would have asked me 2 days ago, I really liked this statement as it relates to equity. But I've had a lot of self-reflection and listen, we are a district that has been working on equity issues for 18 years. Have we been perfect? No, but we've done some incredible work. And probably even longer than that, but we were intentional about it 18 years ago, I should say. We are one of the leaders in the state as it regards equity and some of the things we have done and accomplished. I would even go and be as bold to say that we are one of the leaders in the country regarding equity. I don't feel like this encapsulates who we are as a district and where we want to go as a district regarding equity. It's not that I don't like this. It's okay. It's just not wow for me. I feel that given our experience, given some of the feedback that we've gotten, we can maybe get to a little better of place. I like the beginning that talks about how we need to lead and engage and a commitment. I think in there needs to be some recognizing that barriers stand in the way of equity. I'm a little cautious about the word institutionalized, not that I don't personally disagree with that, but I think when we start putting in words like institutionalized, we put ourselves at risk for Office of Civil Rights, litigation, if we are admitting to our own institutionalized shortcomings. We may all agree that those exist in general, but I think we have to be very careful of that. I think it's better handled if we say we recognize there are barriers and barriers that need to be overcome in us getting towards equity type of thing. Going back to the statement, so I think we need to have some recognizing of equity issues. The leading is important. Removing the barriers, I think, is important. I think that we make sure that we state in there that all students are valued as part of our culture. We talk about culture all the time, about how all students should feel safe and welcomed and respected and valued in their school. I'd like to take some of that maybe and somehow put that in here, condensed possibly. And otherwise, I think it's good. I would like to maybe see us wrap it up in something that we recognize that the future success of our district depends on our commitment to this equity and to address the equity challenges. And in doing so, it helps all of our students achieve to their greatest potential. So those are just some of my thoughts. Again, it's not that I hate this. I just think we could maybe tweak a little bit. And I think some wonderful feedback was sent back from all the groups. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Mark, President Razak, I just did want to make two quick comments. One, the institutionalized was not meant to be a term that would at all be part of necessarily the equity statement, meaning that the work that we do, we want to be sure that it's embedded as part of our district. That's basically what we're discussing there. And I think that regarding the comment, Mark, regarding us being a leader as far as equity, I think we certainly have done some strong things in some areas. I think we have a long way to go as far as equity is concerned. And that's why we're beginning to work in this particular initiative and wanted to implement a policy and procedure as part of our board goals.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And, I just wanted to make that point that we have done a lot, right? And but it's not like we're just deciding to do stuff on equity. We've been doing things for a while. Absolutely, we still have a long ways to go. But I just wanted to make it, I didn't want it to make it sound like we just decided to do this a year ago. We've been talking as a board for a long time about it. I know as a district, we've had board goals before regarding equity and achievement gaps and stuff like that. So it was just a statement, Susan. I absolutely agree with you. We have a long way to go. So, thanks.
Other comments or questions?
I have some comments. First, I appreciate all the work that's been done. It's taken a while for us to get to this point. And I, think about this kind of work. It shouldn't be surprising that it takes a long time to get through this. And I think this is a good time. It kind of makes sense that we're doing this now, and I think it's a good time for us to be addressing it more fully. I approved of the statement as it was sent out last time, and the feedback is shared tonight. I think there might, as Mark said, might be some tweaks that we could do to make it somewhat stronger. But I overall kind of do feel, as we've gone through everything. I mean, we are going through an equity policy and we are going through our equity statement and dealing with all the issues that are out there in our country right now that is exposing racism and white supremacy throughout our country. So this is a big deal, and I think sometimes our attitudes and our ideas are evolving. So my take is, from some of the feedback, is they were looking for some accountability in the statement. But I also think overall, people are looking for that soul that speaks to the commitment. And we do that by being vulnerable with our discussion. And this board presented last November about how powerful being vulnerable is to make us a better board. And I think in this work, we are going to have to be more vulnerable. So I'm okay with just a few tweaks on the statement, but I do think the vulnerable piece should be in why we are presenting this right now. So my thought was, and I shared it with Susan, was that we have something of a prologue to it that kind of speaks to our origin of this district, speaks to, you know, the fact that, you know, school districts in the US host Board of Education decisions, started a lot of racist practices. And we are a part of that, whether we like it or not. And I think some of those things have to be recognized, and our work, as Mark said, should also be recognized. But we also have to admit that we despite our best intentions, we fall short. There are areas such as the achievement gap that remain fairly steadfast. So I think a prologue would be helpful for the statement. I think it would be helpful for our community to understand our commitment to the journey. I'm sure you all are reading because we to educate ourselves, and this is a big issue. So I have been trying to educate myself. A book I just listened to or finished listening to this weekend was called I'm Still Here by Austin Channing Brown. And she speaks, intention is not action. And she's reconciliation. In a chapter she calls Justice, Then Reconciliation. In it, she reflects that reconciliation is revolutionary, oriented to structural change, and always sides with justice. So I'm wondering, have we, with this statement, stated where we are coming from? Have we been vulnerable to the reasons why we need to make this statement and begin this process again or in a different way? So that is the reason why I'm thinking a prologue would be helpful, so that when we are putting this out there, we are saying we are taking this step, and it will be a more authentic and meaningful and strategic step. So a strategic plan is another phrase that is probably missing from our statement right now. Another thing that I read in this book that hits me as important is
Uh-oh. I don't know if Kathy froze.
That's very dramatic of her.
Yeah.
that.
Kathy, we lost you there briefly.
Am I on now?
You're on now, but you might need to go back 60 seconds, please.
60 seconds, really?
All right, maybe 30. I'm throwing a number there.
10.
All right.
You were making the comment about the additional chapter that you were speaking,
Okay, so it starts with the diversity efforts without looking at power structures can have the opposite effect. It can keep it feeling good and innocent and even maybe even progressive, all the while preserving the roots of racial injustice. So I read these words, and I've listened to other folks, and I have also just tried to educate myself. And I also look at what Naperville United has done. And they started with that they were a sundown. You know, Naperville was a sundown city. So I think there's got to be some recognition there, because we know where we've been. We know we have done some amazing stuff. I mean, even despite that, we are one of the district people for special education programs. So I don't think it's a full of shame, but I think we do have to recognize where our weaknesses are, because I think that would speak to our commitment to our work for equity. That's all I got to say.
I would like other board members to participate. Ms. Grover, do you have any comments?
Yes, a couple of things. The word talents, in reading that, I don't know, I just like it if it was affirm each student. I don't know if we need the talents in there. That's one of the things I noticed. The other thing is, I was looking at the comments from the different parental groups. Some groups thought the equity statement was strong and they loved it. Other groups, like Kathy mentioned, wanted a prologue in the sense to have the history of proactively acknowledging racial and cultural biases that we had. And my take on it is, I want to move forward. I'm okay with having a prologue, but at the same time, I don't want this then to take another few months, or, you know, we got the ball rolling. How long are we going to continue tweaking it? That's my question. I know there was questions as to how are we going to implement, and the details will come later in our policies, in our procedures. This is just, for me, this is just like an outline A, but the details will come in. I noticed another school district has a resolution, and in the resolution they have details. Perhaps we can have details like that. So for me, I want an equity statement. I want to have something, whether it is now or if we tweak it and it's at the next board meeting or next two board meetings, but I don't want it to continue so long, because like Mark said and somebody else mentioned, we are 18 years in, we're doing this, and we got to get it done and move forward.
Thank you. Ms. Donahue?
So I also read all of the comments that were submitted. I mean, we looked at this for almost 2 months. So I guess I'm surprised by all the comments coming out right now. I agree with some of the words Natasha had. I viewed this as an overall position statement for our board, for our district, that would guide all sorts of other behaviors. So it's the start. I wouldn't be opposed to a prologue, but why can't that be like the first step after we put this in place, along with many, many others? And yeah, we've been at this for 18 years, but we still have lots of issues, and our achievement gap is just one highly visible piece. So for me, it's very important that we get something like this in place as overall guidance and statement for the district, and then move on from there with very specific actions and plans.
Thank you. Mr. Karubas?
Yeah, I support the motion and adopting this statement. I think I've mentioned before, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Just like ourselves, the statement isn't perfect, and I appreciate the feedback and I appreciate the process. But from what I'm hearing being proposed, we're going to take 3 steps back and maybe not reach consensus and not have agreement, and it's going to take a year. So I want to move the ball, adopt the statement, and work on the next step, because I think that's what our constituents, our education community is looking for. They want to read more into the statement than beyond what the statement is. It is just a statement. It's not a statement and a prologue. It's not a statement with data points. and measurables and reports and timelines for reports. It's just a statement, and we can work on all the ornaments that we want to put on this tree to make it better, and we will. But I don't want to say that we're not going to move forward with just a statement. I think it reflects poorly on us to try to get everything done at once and not get something done. So I support the motion. I support the statement as is. We can make it better, and we should reflect on it just as we do all of our policies. They come up for adoption and review. And there's things that we can add to this, but I look forward to doing that at future board meetings. I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, Ms. Deming.
I shared the feedback. I didn't share mine. I am very concerned with us ensuring that we do move forward. I think the statement it's important for us. I did feel that we're missing data points in here or data analysis and ensuring that we have accountability. But I am very, very concerned about us not moving forward. And I think it's critical that we provide the district with the charge to indicate and determine how and who's going to lead us forward. There is quite a bit to be done. The statement is our statement. It's not our policy and procedure. So we're putting the statement that's not even our goal, because our goal is policies and procedures. So the specifics I had shared earlier with President Razak, mentioned to Catherine earlier that, understanding what is our strategic plan so that those specific things that have been done, yes, there has been work done within the district also, with community and parental groups, but ensuring that we have a strategic plan so that we know where we're going, how we're going, and taking a look back to see, have we met those successes? Have we reached those successes that we want to reach? So I am in support of where we are now with maybe a couple of tweaks to include accountability, but I do want us to move forward.
So here's my question. I don't not want to support this. I think, we started doing this a while back because we all strongly believe in this. And I think we all recognize that, yes, the details, the measurables, the work, that all comes later, right? We've been doing it, but that's the work that goes on, with our parent groups, with administration, with all the things that come out of this mission statement or this policy that we're creating. I guess if we're hearing a few of us just want a couple minor revisions to this, that where is the feeling that we need to rush to get this approved? If we take another month on this, it's not going to prevent the work that we're already doing. It's not going to prevent any work that's already planned to be done. It's just revising this statement. This statement is not holding up the amazing things that are going on with our equity director, with PDAC, with our P group, Pages Paths, the P groups at the high school. They're not all waiting for this statement, right? So let's, if we feel like this is not exactly where it needs to be, why do we need to approve it tonight? I guess is all I'm asking and saying. And again, I think we could just take a little bit more time since we got some really good feedback. So.
And this is where really weird when I agree with Mark. So I think another week or two to tweak the statement it is only a part of what we are doing, and it's only a start. But I do think we got feedback. I think some of it was good feedback. And I have an issue with us asking for feedback and then disregarding it, especially when we ask regarding this statement. We got feedback that probably has more to do with the work, but I think some of the feedback about accountability, having a strategic plan or wanting to create a strategic plan, those are kind of things that we could put in there. I don't think any of us want to keep wordsmithing it, but I do think it bodes well for the community when we listen to the community after we ask for their feedback. And it bodes well for us that we will have the community support in working on this. It is a huge long process. So Mark, I'm agreeing with you. I cannot believe it.
So now for something completely different, I would like to go to page 8 of the presentation. And it's part of the constituent feedback. And it says, we want to believe the district and the board are committed to equity. Seeing is believing. And what's missing, and what's been missing for 17 years, has been the power base, not necessarily having a statement or affirming the work of all our wonderful groups. Yes, PDAC, our P groups, our LGBT communities, our special ed groups, all these groups have been working, sometimes showing up to board meetings, and there's very little policy, and there is clearly no statement from the board, and we are the power base. So maybe I'm reading it different, but believing the district and the board are committed to equity, we need to take a stance. The other thing is, I think we're wordsmithing. If you read your journal from the Illinois School Board, they talked about equity. They talked about an equity statement, and it says the following: the equity statement will serve as a guidepost for the equity work of the district and provide the framework to focus on racial equity at every level. This statement is meant to guide the equity work and is not actual policy. So I'm using the terminology from our organization as they define what an equity statement is. And I understand when we can wordsmith it and we can defer this, but the longer we take, I don't feel, and maybe the word institutionalize is not the right word, but we need to take a leadership role in this. And until we adopt a statement, we have not. So that's my 2 cents worth.
I just want to, I want to say that all of the comments that were given were important. I know, Kathy, you said some of them, but I think all of them were important. And I took a lot of those comments as actions that we need to take after approving this statement. So I approve the statement as is if we're going to take a vote on it today.
And I feel like I'm in a quandary here because an equity statement, I know where we all feel on this in terms of where our hearts and heads are at. But there's clearly a risk of getting yeses and nos and being misperceived. So I need some assistance here.
Well, President Razak, I think, I do value the comment that Kathy made regarding us coming to a consensus, saying that we're going to receive feedback and then now analyzing that feedback and then coming to can you go to slide, one more slide, please? Slide, one more, please. Confirmed statement. Oops, you know what? I'm sorry. Can you go back? I'm looking for the process. I can't think of which. Go back. Okay, right here. Thank you. Board drafts an equity statement. Board shares the statement with key constituency groups for feedback. After analyzing feedback, board finalizes equity statement. So if we take a look at that, then we would serve ourselves in order to finalize the statement after the analysis of the feedback that we received.
All right. And from my perspective, what does that mean given our OMA practices? It means that we go back to the drawing board and only one board member can provide feedback to you at a time. And we cannot share that until the next board meeting.
But I'm gonna say, we got the feedback like over a week ago, right? Everyone had the opportunity to read the comments. So if they had items to change, they should have proposed those.
That's.
I didn't get the feedback until Thursday, and yeah, we've been talking about it. I think the analyzation of the feedback is what we did tonight in an open meeting. That's where I'm at. I feel like we've all shared our own opinions where we're at with the statement and taking in the feedback. I think we either decide that we're going to tweak it or we decide we're not going to tweak it tonight. So, and I.
Can can we bring up the other PowerPoint, please?
Yes, I can bring it up. I did close it, so let me open it back up.
So here's something else I'll say while we're waiting to do that, Susan, if that's okay. So I recognize and I appreciate and I can respect board members that want to just move forward. I hope that us that may feel that it just needs a little fine tuning to allow that to happen. Again, I don't know why there's a need or a rush to get this decided on tonight. Crazy Kathy, I'm going to agree with you too. Yeah, I kind of view this as our discussion on the feedback that we received. And while I think we had a great starting point and a great statement that we got out to the groups, I also think we need to take a little bit of that into consideration. And I think it will be very well served. And I think, like Mike said, I think we will get it to a point where that will not be part of policy, but will be our guiding principle around some of our policies. So, yeah, I'll let Susan go back to where you were.
I asked for this to be pulled up. Can you please go to near the end? Can you? Right here. Thank you. So I did pull together something that, just in light of some of the feedback that we had received, just in case we came to a particular to this discussion. And this I edited somewhat, amended a little bit based on some of the feedback from an accountability standpoint that some of the feedback that we received. So if we make a determination that, or we have been discussing, but this is a potential one that really takes a lot of what we had before, but did add some of the accountability that that was mentioned.
So it appears that we could be at a standstill, and I want to have as much of a unified approach as possible. So we either can call a question and take a vote. We can pull the motion and maybe make a motion to defer the decision to the next meeting. Those seem to be choices that we could make. I need help.
Well, we need to do we need to take a vote on the other one, and then before we can make another motion?
Well, there's
on deference, or
there's either a motion on the floor that we have to take a vote on, or we have to decide if we're going to withdraw that motion.
Yeah, so you either have to take a vote or withdraw it.
Yes.
I am going to make a motion to table the motion that is currently pending, and I seconded. I think there's enough discussion, and this is not something that, this is not a motion I would want to be denied. And it's not a motion that I would want to move forward with great division on the board. It's a bad first step. So I move that we table the motion and finish this 3 months from now.
Well, let's not say that.
No, we're not gonna, it's not gonna be 3 months from
Can
now,
you
Justin.
withdraw that portion of your motion, please?
That was a speaking comment. I moved to table the pending motion.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to table the equity belief statement as presented. Any other further discussion?
So, okay, I want to understand the process. So if we table the motion, would the next step then be to incorporate, would Susan, would you like incorporate the feedback we've gotten, or and make another statement and we vote and see which one we like, or again, do the whole process again? How does it work?
It would appear to me that we would go back to what we did before, which is only one board member can talk to Susan at a time. She can't share any other people's work, or that's a violation of OMA. So we'll be back at the point of having 5 or 6 statements for us to consider.
Susan, statement 7, which is right now showing, is that what you came up with by incorporating the feedback from the different groups?
Some of the feedback, yes.
Okay.
It is it's used. It is, yes.
So is this a brand new statement?
It is. It's an additional to the statement that we had, Lori, and then one of the feedbacks that had been suggested or had been looked for was accountability. And so near the end of the statement that we had previously, I added some data-driven and accountability measures statements on near the end of the original statement that we had and had submitted. Again, as we took a look at it, there was constituent feedback that did feel positive about the statement that we had previously, in addition to feedback that wanted some amendments and changes. So taking a look at the entire realm of feedback that we received.
Susan, can you provide this to us again, this right here that we're looking at? I'm sure I have it, but
no, you don't have.
No, it's a brand new. It's brand new.
Okay.
It's brand new. That's why. Okay. And this will have to be listed on there as part of the board packet.
So I guess if we're going to follow that, what Natasha just asked, as far as, and Mike kind of identified, we can only have discussions one-on-one with Susan, or else we violate Open Meetings Act, and Susan can share some of our feedback, because that would be, so I guess, I trust the work that Susan has been doing on this. I think she will equitably represent all of our thoughts and opinions on this. I mean, just even looking at this one, there's, so I'm okay with that process if other board members are.
So would you also go back to the groups and get feedback on this new one if we came up with a different one? I'm just worried we're getting in an endless circle here.
No, yeah, that wasn't part of the process that we indicated. Our process indicated that we would analyze the feedback that we received from the first statement, and then we would finalize, and we would finalize our statement, and then we would give the charge to the administration.
I'm going to second what Mark said, that I would trust Susan to do the tweaking on the statement and bring it back to us at the next meeting.
We need everyone to submit any feedback that they have, and then we'll come back with however many possibilities at the next meeting.
Any other discussion? Jeannie, I need a roll call.
Okay, so I just have one question. So Mr. Karubis, he moved to table the pending motion, correct?
That's correct.
And who seconded that?
No one.
Mark.
I believe I did, as long as the 3 months was out there.
So Mr. Rising?
Yes, I second that.
Okay, so Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Mr. Rising,
Yes.
Ms. Peel,
Aye.
Ms. Grover,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Hi.
Mr. Razak,
Aye.
and Ms. Deming.
Aye.
Motion passes. The motion is deferred until the next meeting. We are now moving to approve policies, and I need a motion to approve policies 2:265, Title IX, Sexual Harassment Grievance Procedure, 7:20, Harassment of Students Prohibited, and policy 5:20, Workplace Harassment Prohibited, for first reading as presented. Can I have?
Mark Rising, I move that the Board of Education approve policy 7:265, policy 7:2.0, policy 5:2.0 for first reading as presented.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Justin, second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any discussions about any of the policies or comments? I don't hear any comment or discussion, so I'm going to proceed. Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rising,
Yes.
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Mr. Razak,
Yes.
Ms. Peel,
Yes.
Ms. Deming,
Aye.
Ms. Grover,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue.
Aye.
Motion passes. We're now moving to our discussion items. And our next item is the annual recruitment and hiring report with Dr. Lee and Carrie Beth Harry. Lewis and Carrie.
Good evening, President Razak, board members, and Dr. Talley. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight our annual hiring report. Joining me to present is Carrie Beth Harry, who serves as our Director of Human Resources. For tonight, we will present several topics for discussion. They include challenges and opportunities that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought about, staffing in the district, We will want to provide an update on the overall teacher workforce in the state and our district with a special eye on certain areas of diversity. We also want to look at recruitment strategies, staff retention, and finally, to talk a little bit about our future focus. Next slide, please. Before we get started and dive into our topics, one celebration we would like to mention is a recent listing of our school district in Forbes magazine. In Forbes' annual release of America's Best Employers, we ranked number 23 in the state of Illinois. The list is divided into 51 rankings, one for each of the 50 states plus the District of Columbia, and was compiled by surveying over 80,000 Americans working for businesses with at least 500 employees. Surveys were conducted on a rolling basis from October 2019 to May of this year, 2020, and responses regarding the same employers were compared throughout the process. As mentioned, our overall rank was 23. The list for our state included companies like Starbucks, Aldi, State Farm, FedEx, Best Buy, Kohl's, and Hyatt, just to name a few. And by the way, we did finish above all of those companies that I just named. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Human Resources, Carrie Beth. Carrie?
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Thank you, Board, for allowing us to share this data. Next slide, please. As we've said before, hiring the right staff is the most important thing that we can do, and COVID-19 has presented us both challenges and opportunities. We wanted to provide some context to the data and hiring components that we'll be sharing with you tonight. Our hiring class was almost 50% smaller than it has been the last few years. This is a direct result of decreased enrollment and an intentional plan to brace for the long-term financial impact of the pandemic. Having said that, we are so excited to introduce our 2021 new hire class to you. This small but diverse group is made up of teachers and administrators who interviewed, were onboarded, and began their careers at 204 remotely. Some of our new hire student teaching experience was completed solely through remote learning. As they began their pinnacle experience, they faced both uncertainty in obtaining licensure and prospects of employment. They are a determined group and will make meaningful connections with our students and their teaching peers. Establishing connections is the foundation of our recruitment strategy. We were able to attend most of our scheduled job fairs and have authentic conversations with candidates before the stay-at-home order began. This allowed us to secure a passionate and diverse cohort of teachers, several of whom are 204 grads. As a district, we had to accept an environment where interviewing was completely done through video. We were prepared and excited about the opportunities to refine the use of our video interviewing platform. Since we previously converted to a paperless onboarding process, we were able to focus our attention this summer on increased communication and an orientation and induction that was less about process and more about support and culture. This is best exemplified in responses we received to a survey of our new staff right before new teacher induction. Responses were overwhelmingly positive and full of excitement. One responded, "What brings me hope is knowing that I'm going to be part of a supportive department and PLC that will guide me through the new challenges we will be facing this school year." We ask that you keep this lens as we share more about our hiring activities. Next slide, please. This slide represents our total staff by FTE and percentage. Our report to you primarily focuses on our teaching staff, as that's our largest group, but it's important to note that 25% of our staff is support staff, 5.8% is non-bargaining, and 2.8% is administration. As a reminder, our non-bargaining staff includes OTs and PTs, registered nurses, technology, business, and HR staff. Next slide, please. Our total FTE has decreased by 22.5 FTE from the beginning of the last school year. This is due to decreased enrollment, most significantly at elementary, and through fiscal planning. Our decreases did not impact mental health services or class sizes at Title I buildings. Next slide, please. These positions continue to be hard to fill. Last year, the state of Illinois could not fill over 1,400 teaching positions, 130 support personnel positions, and around 80 administrative positions. The number of students that have English as a second language has risen from 4.4% in 2014 to 10.1% in 2017. The number of students that have Spanish as a primary language has decreased by 6.5% in those same years, meaning the number of primary languages other than English has increased. It's been difficult for us to find bilingual teachers for other languages besides Spanish, most notably. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Carrie. It was discussed in our most recent topic by our board. Diversity is extremely important to this district. Our students all come from various socioeconomic, religious, cultural, and many other diverse backgrounds. We celebrate that diversity within our district. As a district, diversity represents one of the 3 areas we are committed to achieving for all of our students, the other 2 being equity and inclusion. This definition of diversity on the screen highlights how we are defining this area. To support the social emotional wellness and academic achievement of all of our students, it's important that we have a workforce that reflects this diversity. For our purposes in this presentation, we will be focusing on the category of race and ethnicity in our workforce. Next slide, please. Most recent Title II data that comes from the Department of Higher Education on teacher preparation enrollment in Illinois shows that in Illinois teaching positions, we have just over 129,000 as of the most recent 2018 to 2019 school report card. States report on 3 types of teacher preparation programs. These include traditional programs, alternative route programs, which are based at institutions of higher education, and then also alternative route programs that are not based at institutions of higher educations. For the purpose of Title II reporting, all traditional programs within an institution of higher education are counted as one program, and all alternative programs within an institution of higher education are also counted as one program. On a national scale, there were over 455,000 enrolled, with 152,000 program completions, which is about a third. In our state, we see in the most recent data just under 13,000 enrolled with just over 4,200 completions. So about 1 in 3 are completing. There are 60 providers in our state. The state is seeing a huge impact in unfilled positions. This report does not include the level or type of educational licensure or endorsement programs. For examples, this does not tell us what number or percentage is going to teach a particular content area like special education or high school math. Next slide, please. This is the numbers by students enrolled in teacher preparation programs. As previously reported in the previous slide, this looks actually at demographic information. Demographic information is not available about students that completed the teacher preparation programs or by licensure area. As you can see, there were over 32,000 that were enrolled in the period beginning here with 2010 to 2011. Of this amount that identified by race, 8% were Hispanic, 7% were African American, 3% Asian, and 1% were 2 or more races. In 2017 to 2018, which is the most recent data of record, there were only 12,000 enrolled. Of this amount, we saw an increase of percent to enrollment in the Hispanic category of 6% to represent a total of 14%. We also saw a slight increase in Asian to 4% and 2 or more races to 4%. The African American demographic group remained unchanged. While the percent of enrollments for several of these groups either increased or remained the same, the actual enrollment continues to be concerning. This year, while showed a slight increase in enrollment for African American, Hispanic, and 2 or more races category, what is still the most concerning is just the overall availability of teachers from all areas, especially from teachers of color. Next slide, please. So we've always talked about why is diversifying our staff so important. We've also talked about that there's really been no significant change in diversity of the teaching workforce in Illinois for about 18 years. We continue to be very concerned about the decrease in the number of students who are attending universities to teach, as well as the low number of teaching candidates of color at many of these colleges and universities. We also always want to hire the best and most highly qualified candidates while we continue to look at increasing the diversity of our workforce. Several stats that we'd like to share with you about our most recent new hire class, that 26% were persons of color. This more than doubles our hiring over the last several years. The overall percentage of our licensed staff also increased to just over 11%. And then 50% of our administrators hires were also persons of color. Next slide, please. This graph is a snapshot of students and teachers in our district. The breakdown by students represents our current enrollment of just over 26,000 students. Looking at the one area of diversity by race and culture, you can see illustrated here that our students of color make up 62% of our district. This is in stark contrast to our teacher workforce of 88.4%. While noted in our previous slide, we increased and in some metrics even doubled our percentage of hires in staff of color, we continue to see the work towards diversification of our staff. Next slide, please. This leads us to talk about strategies for recruitment. While sharing information of our review this year, this is an area that we will be sharing some of our successes, but also what we believe are opportunities that will come from some of the most recent challenges due to operating in a digital remote environment. Next slide, please. This year, we hired nearly 60 FTE in our district. As was mentioned earlier, over 25% of this class were persons of colors. Some of the highlights in this slide show nearly 45% of the new hire class of 2021 is at the high school level. Nearly 60% are within their early years of teaching with 3 years or less experience. And over half of this new recruit class has an advanced degree. This is also the first class that was brought in a completely virtual setting for orientation. We'd like to thank our Department of Professional Development, Curriculum Instruction, Technology, IPEA, and Human Resources. Without those departments, we would not have been able to pull this orientation setting off. We were able to sit in on several groups as they went through orientation, and the successful onboarding of this class was made possible with the collaboration of all of these critical groups. Next slide, please. Listed here are some of our recruitment strategies. While this is not an exhaustive list, we like to take a moment to share just a couple of the strategies and what we're doing with them. One of the strategies that you've heard a little bit about before is our Grow Your Own program. We recognize that a multifaceted approach is needed to increase overall diversity in our workforce. The data trends continue to show an overall decrease in the number of candidates, not only entering the profession, but also actual completion rates are at an all-time low. We must continue to look at ways to not only attract candidates to our district, but also create our own. The premise of the Grow Your Own program focuses on finding and recruiting, selecting, and hiring our own students to work as future teachers in our own schools. Another strategy that we'd like to touch upon really looks at what is our hiring process. When we think about our hiring process, We must be intentional about it, and from creating earlier posting requirements, aggressive timelines, to an interview process that seeks out educators with a critical eye towards candidates who will thrive in a diverse setting. Not only meeting our students' needs, but excelling in both their expectations and ability to make connections both in and outside of the classroom. Several systemic areas where change has and continues to occur includes every school having an interview team that it is in itself diverse to allow for multiple viewpoints to be expressed. Equity inclusion questions at every round of interviewing and training interview teams to look for candidates that are the best fit for the school and our students. At this time, I'd like to turn it back over to Carrie Beth, who will discuss some of our additional strategies for recruitment.
Next slide, please. Before the stay-at-home order, we were able to attend most of the scheduled job fairs and connected with over 425 candidates. We successfully ran 2 student-teacher open houses, which had over 80 participants. The open house served as an exclusive networking opportunity for our current student teachers to meet administrators and other student teachers. We shared with them our vision and current opportunities, and they had their resumes reviewed, asked candid questions, and practiced interviewing. Feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and we were able to make connections with these candidates early. We will continue to work with the district equity leadership team, newly formed affinity groups, our university partners, and recruit through local organizations such as churches, fraternities and sororities, and local chambers of commerce. We'd like to thank both Jennifer Rowe and Adrienne Morgan for their leadership in these areas. You cannot underestimate the significance of a face-to-face interaction at a recruiting event, but we know we can also expand our virtual presence and plan to explore ways to connect with more candidates online. We spoke to you last year about Spark Hire, the video interview platform that we were piloting with job fair candidates. We're excited to report that we've completed over 685 interviews with a 93% conversion rate. This means that 93% of those who accept an invitation to interview are completing the interview. It's estimated that we saved about 250 hours compared to traditional screening by using the video interviews. We have plans to increase our use of this product throughout the hiring process. Next slide, please. One of our goals is to recruit and retain 204 graduates. We'd like to again warmly welcome back to the district Tyler, Alyssa, Taylor, Disha, Molly, Brianna, Arlen, Courtney, and Michael. Next slide, please. We understand that there are a number of reasons that staff decide to pursue employment elsewhere, but we also know that establishing a solid relationship at the time of hire improves retention, therefore reducing the cost associated with recruitment and hiring. Our teacher retention rate of 96.1% compared to the state average of 85.7% is a source of pride. We have retained 98.7% of our excellent rated teachers. Again, another reason the district is a great place to work. Next slide, please. As you can see, our turnover was the lowest it's been in many years. This is in large part due to a small retirement class, but it also reflects a staff that was reluctant to uproot during a pandemic. Of the 145.8 FTE who left, 81.5 FTE were licensed for teachers. This is 3.9% of our licensed staff. Of the 81.5, 33% were non-tenured. Next slide, please. We continue to build value in our exit survey, and our response rate reflects that at 82.4%. Responses were primarily teachers and at the elementary and early childhood level. All provided valuable feedback. Next slide, please. This slide represents the top 3 reasons that staff indicated that they were leaving for. They could identify multiple reasons. I want to remind you that these percentages are totals of all respondents. Our classified and non-bargaining staff represented 77% of the responses on career advancement, 54% of the responses on workload, and 73% on salary. Our licensed staff represented responses in all three, but they were more evenly weighted with classified and non-bargaining in their responses on workload conditions, and that was 46%. Next slide, please. We're pleased that 91.9% would recommend IPSD 204 to others as a place to work. This explains why we're the 23rd best place to work in Illinois. Next slide, please. We are very proud of the service of our staff and recognized 484 individuals this year. We formally recognized teaching service for 20, 25, 30, and 35 years of service during Institute Day. Next slide, please.
So what's next? As we look toward the future, as we talked about with the COVID-19 pandemic, while it created many challenges for us this year, we are looking at the opportunities that have come about, what this pandemic has really taken us through. As Carrie Beth talked about, the more focus on having an increased use of our video platform for interviewing will be a future focus for us in the current year. We expect that with the environment that we're in, to make use of that platform in a much more robust way that we've never had to before. We remain resolute in our ongoing commitments to increasing diversity in our workforce. I would be remiss if I didn't mention a lot of the some of the encouraging data that you saw was a direct result of my predecessor, Doug Icarius, and his vision that he had for this department. And we'll continue to work in this area to truly make sure that Indian Prairie is representative of all of our students. We also want to take a look at what makes up an Indian Prairie 204 teacher. We are very excited to start to explore this area and to come up with critical attributes and other characteristics that go into what we believe are the best parts of being an Indian Prairie 204 teacher. And we expect to share additional information of that in the future. We want to be able to expand the Grow Your Own program. We know that with some of the data that we shared, we really have to focus on creating our own students to not only come back, but actually teach in our schools and have a great career here. The students that was shared earlier, we're excited about. We wanted to add to that list. And we know that's going to take a huge investment, not only in their careers, but also in our time and efforts with them. And finally, and probably most importantly, we want to continue to support the efforts of all of our staff and all that they're doing every day in the classroom. We would be nothing without them, and we want to make sure that we continue to work collaboratively with them. And we have a great partnership with both. We're blessed to have great partnerships with both of our unions, and we look to maintain that. At this time, we'll take any questions that you may have for us.
Thank you, Dr. Lee and Carrie Beth. Comments or questions?
Just one quick comment and one quick question for me. First of all, thank you. Couple thank yous. Thank you to our teachers that came back to our district that were students from our district. That's awesome. Thank you, for your team, Dr. Lee, that continues to focus on hiring to be represented, getting the most qualified person, but finding candidates that are representative of our students as well. So I just want to thank you for that. Slide 9, I don't know if you can fly back there. I just wanted to clarify. you said in 2010 that there were approximately 32,000 students getting their teaching degree, and 8 years later, that number is down to 12,000. Were those correct numbers?
Yeah, and actually the 32,000 were just enrolled. We had less that actually came out of completing that. But you're exactly right.
So within 8 years, we're a third of the teachers in college than we were 8 years ago. Okay.
Correct. And even less are coming out. So for every 3 that are enrolled, only 1 is coming out with having completed the requirements.
Pretty scary. Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Other comments or questions?
I have a comment. Same slide. Louis, looking at that slide, what's interesting when you look at it based on race and ethnicity and you apply the same stat, because I know we've gotten a lot of public comments sometimes on hiring diverse teachers, and the problem is the pool of teachers. So applying the same stats, I get 1,200 diverse candidates for the entire state of Illinois. And then we can't forget, we have 860 school districts in Illinois. So if you take the pool of 1,200 versus, and then 860 school district, we are very fortunate. And I think it's kudos to your team and Doug's team on how many, and there was a slide on that, how many diverse teachers we were able to hire. And it's the recruiting process that you're doing and coming up with new ideas, because everybody's grappling for that same from that same pool. I wanted to talk about your how also not just recruiting, but how you retain those teachers, because I know Jennifer Rowe had started an affinity group for teachers and mentor groups for teachers. If you want to talk about that, perhaps.
Absolutely. Carrie Beth?
Yeah, we will continue to work very closely with Jen Rowe and the professional learning team and curriculum and instruction to really continue I talked about relationships earlier, but really continue that relationship so that we are retaining the teachers. We're investing a lot in them. They're expecting a lot out of us. And so that continued collaboration between those teams is very important. So we will continue to work with those new affinity groups and Jen and her team. The other comment I just want to make is the Grow Your Own. I don't know if a lot of students know about the TCD program and the early childhood, and where they can get 4 credit hours. That would be great. And if we can maybe increase that work with our local colleges to maybe increase that to half a semester, because that would help the students out. But I like that program because if the students know from the get-go they want to be teachers, it helps them out.
Yeah, I agree. And I know the state's very focused, and the community colleges and universities as well, because this information that we're sharing is not surprising information for them. And so I think anything we can do, like you said, Ms. Grover, to increase that exposure and really highlighting some of the ways that students can get a jump on their credits and also save parents some dollars is going to be extremely beneficial.
Other comments?
Dr. Lee, I have a question. I know that one time there had been some conversations at the state level to potentially encourage persons who had maybe chose another industries and then, as a second career, looking at coming back in their area of expertise to potentially teach. And they were looking at some ways, there was some discussion about ways to help make it easier for those that had strong foundations in a particular industry to move into the classroom. Are there any things that are being done in that arena to try and attract teachers that have true expertise? Do you know?
I know through the some of the alternative route programs that are not primarily based at a college or university, Those are some areas that the state is, I think I know, investing heavily in. I haven't seen any recent information. I think because of the recent pandemic, I know that work is continuing, but I think, some of that, that work has just, not been paused, but I know it continues to be a big priority. Carrie Beth, anything else? Okay.
I wondered because I was wondering if there is any type of way for, a pool of those particular, candidates to be made known. But I certainly understand, with everything we're going through right now, that we may not be getting that may not be as easy to get that information. But, as we go forward in the future, if there is, that might be a source.
Absolutely.
To follow up on Susan's question, and it's kind of a follow-up to that, for a period of time, the state of Illinois was pretty stringent on accepting other credentials from universities outside the state. Do you know, have they loosened those up? And is there anything maybe from your perspective that we could do as a board to try to influence legislators to maybe make a change, or are we in better shape now?
I can answer this, President Razak. The state has implemented full reciprocity between states. So if you have a license, for example, in Indiana, you can apply for a license in Illinois and are given a full license here. So they have done several things to make it easier for candidates to come back to Illinois. In fact, we have a handful of new teachers this class that came from out of state. We're very familiar with the area, and we were able to bring them back. So yes, that is in place.
Great. Other comments or questions? Thank you, Dr. Lee and Carrie Beth, for the presentation. We are moving to our next discussion. That is the Technology Services Update. This will be presented by Adam Smeets. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you so much, President Razak and the Board of Education. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you our annual update for the 2019 and 2020 school year. Next slide, please. As a reminder, go back one. Thank you. As a reminder, this presentation covers District Board Goal 1 and also 5170, 6210, 6220, and 6235. Next slide, please. Before we even began a presentation about tech services, I wanted to make sure and start with this slide. And it's a recognition of the hard work, efforts, and commitment of the entire technology services team. So you'll see the names of each member of our team and also some folks who either moved on to different positions or are in different roles within the district, but each of them were involved in some way, shape, or form since this 2019 and 20 school year. And I just ask us to look at those and know that these are the people that are behind the support tickets, making sure that our network services are available, making sure that your Zoom meeting is operating properly, the SIS implementation, and a number of other projects that we've had during COVID and also pre-COVID time periods. Next slide, please. So for today's board presentation, we'll be talking through a modified version of our Future Ready Technology Plan update, walking through the 204 SIS implementation and where we are today. Also talking a little bit about our department response to the COVID-19 closures, and lastly ending with what's next with questions at the end. So interestingly, and maybe this is a precursor, but when we first launched the Future Ready Technology Plan, we started with this quote as a foundation statement. And I think it is no more true than it is right now than ever before. Technology empowers people to do what they want to do. It lets people be creative. It lets people be productive. It lets people learn things they didn't think they could learn before. And so in a sense, it's all about potential. The technology, the software, it doesn't do anything. It enables people to do things they didn't think they could do. And I wanted to start this section to talk really about the amazing things that our teachers, our staff, our families, and our students are doing right now, where they're in a state in which they're either working from home, working in our district, and really leveraging technology in a way where it's beginning to fade to the background, and we're really seeing the true potential of amazing things that they're doing. So I just wanted to call out and celebrate the amazing work that they're doing. Next slide, please. You've seen before in previous board presentations about our future technology plan, and along the left-hand side, you'll see each of those goals. And I indicated that it would be a modified portion of this because the portion of the board presentation I'd like to emphasize is about the SIS implementation and our work during the COVID-19 closures. So I'm only going to pick a few in here for you about key areas. The first is a thank you to the board for the previous approval on increases of our internet capacity. It was great foresight to have that approval in place because we are using every ounce of our increase in bandwidth that we use in our district each day. In a very short period of time, I think it's in 2 hours, we use the bandwidth of a single family household in Naperville in that time period, just in video consumption for Zoom meetings. We did, as Dr. Talley indicated before, we went through our high school Chromebook and staff device exchanges and provided K-1 families with a one-to-one device and are working on distribution for the connectivity for those devices for Wi-Fi. We are also still in the process of rolling out additional smart board replacements with Promethean boards. A major win opportunity for our staff has been having Zoom licensing for every single staff member. So anyone who logs into Zoom that's a staff member or a teacher in our district has access to facilitate a Zoom meeting. And then also, I just wanted to acknowledge not only the partnerships we've had outside of our district, but also those within the district as well for curriculum and instruction, professional learning. And again, I can go on, but I just really genuinely appreciate and our department celebrates the partnerships that have been created during this time period. Next. I know that social emotional learning is a major topic right now, especially in the online environment where so many students are not in our physical schools. One of the things that we have as part of our new web filter that we replaced a few months ago is the ability to do social emotional learning notifications. So if a student indicates self-harm, abuse, or any other areas that would be of concern for a building, the building administration would receive a notification for awareness. So we'll be working on that with our buildings over the coming weeks and the administration in those spaces. We have increased resources in the support center, welcoming our business office and additional C&I team members so that the one-stop shop that you have in the support center is really, again, the foundational location you go to when you need assistance. We did also open up student password resets for pre-K through 12 plus because historically students would work with their buildings to reset their passwords. But we wanted to make sure parents were in control of that reset process to support their child in that experience. And lastly, we did receive our 251 million project hotspot devices about a week and a half ago and are in the process of preparing those. And we've also applied for Project 10 million, which is the next step after Project 1 million that's being offered by T-Mobile. If you recall, Sprint and T-Mobile have merged. And so the Project 10 million is their effort, again, which is based on income status and several other factors, but we've completed our application for that process as well. Next. So launching our new student information system. So a year and a half ago, you had a flurry of messages and communications and a board presentation about the student information system and all the wonderful things we were going to do in person for a training plan and all the amazing things we were going to do with families and schools. And then COVID-19 hit, which created a wonderful experience for everyone. What I wanted to make sure and say is probably the #1 question that we receive from families and also from different folks in the district is, can't we just pause? Why couldn't we just pause? Couldn't we have just stuck with what we had for a period of time? And I will say we could not delay this implementation. The train was very far down the tracks at that point when COVID-19 had struck within our district. Contracts were already executed with other vendors. We also had started our data migration processes already to begin things in motion. And we had an end date with our former student information system that the system would be disabled as of August 15th. I think most of our data team has that etched in their mind as an end date as well. But I just wanted to acknowledge that once we were down that path, there was not an ability for us to stop the train on the tracks at that point. So we'll continue to the next slide, please. I won't go through all these bullets because this was on a previous board presentation, but as we go into this area, I wanted to remind folks of the reasons that we selected and needed to pick a new student information system. And it was that we wanted a stable, secure, and redundant and reliable foundation to work from. As with any rollout, every rollout, either talk to any chief information officer or chief technology officer, you'll find that there's always going to be bumps in that experience and people learn things as they go through it. But I will tell you that even in the time period that we weren't using our former student information system, we had roughly 25 outages on that former system, even when we weren't using it. And so the fact that we've had the stability that we've had has been an amazing testament to EduPoint and the Synergy product. And also at the same time, giving an online registration experience that really was personal to individual families and also gave them the ability to identify their gender identity of their child, themselves, and preferred names and nicknames and other resources. And we'll talk through a little bit about online registration in just a moment as well. Next slide, please. So refresher, watch out for some fun graphics to come. So April through May of 2019, we started this process in doing focus group workshops. Fast forward May to June, we went through an RFP model and started collecting feedback from vendors. Next slide, please. And we arrived at these recommendations that notifications and mobile devices are essential. And I'll share with you some key data in a moment about how our families are using those mobile applications. Integration with Google Classroom was a must, but that the additional options needed to be available for outreach for families, as well as having reducing clicks and steps for processes being critical for families. Next slide, please. So fast forward, and we go through our search process from April to August of 2019. We selected a vendor, you approved the agreement, which was an amazing step forward for the district. And we migrate all of our data, 30-some million record sets are ready to go. And next week, we're gonna start training with staff, and no, district closure at that point. So all of our training sessions that were scheduled, we had 40 different in-person training sessions that were canceled, flights that were canceled by our vendor, hotels, transportation, all the meetings that were created. And we know that that was a frustration for staff, and that that was an area, especially for our team, where we had every intention of meeting with staff in district, working one-on-one and in teams to go through the training process. That was a direct impact of that process. We even tried to figure out how we were going to do, like, can we record something and send it to people? What's the process we're going to take? I put a second icon there, not because I like to copy and paste, but as a notation that all of the configuration process and building out the student information system was done from individual team members' homes. This was all done remotely through 7, 8, 9, 10-hour Zoom meetings of doing configuration after configuration and setups. Next slide, please. So we did our rollover at our traditional time period, which took place on June 1st to the 7th, and on June 8th, we launched. We had close to 40,000 connections flood the system at the exact same time of all parents who were excited to do online registration. To celebrate that, we actually decommissioned, took down our old student information system at that time, and families began the registration process at that point. Again, we wanted to continue training at Teacher Institute Day in person. That, again, wasn't possible, but what we did do is create a series of self-paced resources for teachers to be able to walk through those trainings at their own pace, as well as have access to go through the system themselves. And again, we talked about online registration, so we'll skip to the next slide, please. So as you recall, in the previous slide, we talked about our benefits of going with this system was that we wanted a mobile on-the-go experience for families. We're not really going as many places as we were before the pandemic, but the easy access to the system from your mobile device was a key piece, as well as streamlining the experience. I did put some text underneath the fourth bullet that year one focused on data cleanup and account validation. So Synergy is really, really, really specific and precise about who has access to your child's information, as it should be. It's a student information system that guards and protects critical information. So in this process, families went through and provided additional information about those that are in their household who should or should not have access to the information, prioritizing emergency contacts. And this year was a really critical year for cleaning up our data, and that next year will be a very streamlined experience for families in a way that all that data has been entered for their children at that point. So I just want to thank the parents and IPPC and a number of other groups that were critical in the success and support that we received in this process. Next, please. So I talked about this previously when we were in our superintendent's cabinet meeting, but I think one of the words that's probably going to be eliminated from Webster's dictionary is going to be the word pivot, because I think everybody's used pivot more times than they probably care to during the past 6 months. But the pivots that we needed to do for COVID-19, I mentioned previously for training, we did do live instruction. We had 1,500 staff members who participated in live instruction in our Zoom meetings. We also recorded those sessions and made them available for staff and administration to review. We had vendor self-paced environments created, as well as staff self-paced training that was participated. We know that training is an ongoing piece. This is not something we do once and it ends. We just have to figure out the methods in which we can still meet with people, but at the same time follow the guidelines that are available within COVID-19. So you'll see more of our live online trainings available, but as the district reviews their practices and protocols, we'll be looking at how we can offer training sessions at similar times and places. Our implementation, as I mentioned before, was completely remote. All of our vendor in-person meetings were canceled. And again, just as a reminder, the joy that we have of Zoom meetings is one that we experienced too as we were going through our configurations and setups. Online registration, we had planned on being in building to be able to support the paper to digital records process, as well as families who needed support. I want to acknowledge that I know that our support response times for families during online registration is not what we would have expected it to be at a 48-hour response time. But just for clarity, we had close to 3,000 to 4,000 communications given the time of week that we were going through for families. And that was a rotating, ongoing 2,000 to 3,000 emails that were coming in from families just asking questions or asking for support. That number now of what we have on a daily basis is down below 350 to 400, depending on the frequency, and we're able to get through a large chunk of those each day. So I just wanted to acknowledge that the appreciation and flexibility and understanding that staff, our parents, our students, and our community have had throughout this experience. And lastly, state and district changes. So the state, as you'll know, we had to reinitiate our online registration process to do follow-ups for what our in-learning process would be, or hybrid model, as well as different approaches. As the state made changes to our guidelines and processes, we also had to adjust online registration for that. So I know some of our families had to go through online registration twice in order to provide some of that additional information that was needed. So again, our appreciation for their flexibility and patience through that process. Next slide, please. So by the numbers, I think these are always really important to take a look at. We're seeing right now about 128,000 peak logins per day on parents and students using the student information system. And since June 8th, roughly 1.4 million logins have taken place within that service. That's a very large number of users accessing the system. But as you'll know, that's also related to online learning and students accessing the student view system for Zoom meetings and other resources. Today, we have just over 10,000 parents or guardians using the mobile app for the parent view, and 3,200 students using the mobile app on their phones. And Synergy Mail, which you'll recall is the secure communications from teacher to parent, teacher to student, and so on in different affinities, where it automatically translates the messages from any one of 47 of their preferred languages or their home languages. 85,000 messages have been sent from that service since inception on June 8th. So we have a large usage of that service, which is great to see. Next slide, please. I had talked about online registration, and one of the comments that at the Board of Education meeting we discussed was reducing paper volumes and the amount of packets that we mailed, because again, I think it was an extremely high number of pages that we were sending out to families to complete. And this year we collected 202,000 documents electronically through Parent View, which is 202,000 less sheets of paper that are being stored in buildings or resources, and also now are part of our disaster recovery plan. So this is part of our kickstart to the electronic records process for going from a paper-based file into a digital or electronic-based file. Next slide, please. From there, I wrote a quote from the previous superintendent, Dr. Sullivan, a comment she made when we were going with the state's notice. We were all sitting in the conference room, and she said, well, I guess it's time to move the district to a remote model. 48 hours, you have 24 hours to bring all essential services, go. And I remember in that moment thinking, okay, how are we going to make this work? All right, we'll figure it out. We're Indian Prairie. We can make anything happen. So let's take a look on the next slide at what we did next. So as Dr. Talley had mentioned earlier, all K-1 students now have access to a Chromebook for remote learning. For context, since the 3rd of September, from 9/3 to 9/14, 43 million web pages have been viewed and 6 million searches have taken place on Chromebooks, with 640,000 YouTube videos being watched. Our staff are taking great steps for security on their devices using VPN. Now that that's on wide scale availability with almost all of our staff using VPN, that's the way to securely connect when using the internet. I want to mention a thank you again to the board for approving our previous firewall purchase that we had made, because this is what allowed us the ability to do a VPN on this large scale at basically a zero cost for us. Our staff have been busy sending almost 30 million emails during that time period, with the Technology Services Department preventing 4,400 phishing attempts from making their way to staff and student inboxes, which are basically folks trying to get access to information. The #1 phishing attempt we see right now is people trying to impersonate a nurse asking for medical documents for a student to go to school. That's the #1 fake phishing email that we see that's coming through. Adrian, I think we had commented before, on your 3rd day was the first phishing attempt that was put in your name. So it didn't take long for people to start creating phishing campaigns. So we did secure out of district telephone numbers, which today teachers were using their personal cell phones to make contact to families or making follow-up outreach. We sent out a communication today to teachers where they can sign up for a out of district number that they can use to make these calls at no cost to them. And we'll be fulfilling those requests as they come through. Also, we'll begin the distribution process for the 250 hotspots we have. But a thank you to Adrian and members of the cabinet for their support in putting forward a partnership between Comcast, Page County, and the district, that more information will be coming on that soon for additional internet access available for families as well. Next slide, please. I want to say, again, this is like the presentation of thank yous and appreciation, but I think we need a little bit of that in the world right now too. So I want to just say to Transportation Services and Ron, to all of our bus drivers as well, they were the heartbeat that kept students connected from March through the remainder of the summer, as well as our staff. When devices would break, our buses were loaded up with Chromebooks, meals, and other resources. It would be a heck of a road trip, but they delivered great technologies to students and things to students. So I just want to express my thanks and appreciation, because it would not have been possible for the 400 or 500 students that were served by this without their dedication and commitment. We did install device exchange towers in our schools, and this gives us the ability that when we do return to in-person learning, students can exchange a Chromebook without having interaction or having to touch another device. The door will pop open, put in their old device, and take out the new device. This is our way of making sure that how are we promoting safe practices with technology and keeping staff and students safe. And lastly, our onboarding of new ed tech tools to the single sign-on. And we did provide, tech does like paper too. We do like paper. We supported the packet process as well during remote learning. So we're thankful for that experience as well. Next slide, please. Just looking at the big pictures, the support center has completed 27,000 support tickets since we went in COVID-19 closures in March. If you remember, I know because it sits in everybody's brain as a key metric number, but that amount of tickets is something that we would do traditionally in a year to a year and a quarter, and we did that since just March. So we have been heavily responding to tickets and going through resources to support the district in ways that I wanted to make sure that folks understood that tech is much more than just delivering your computer. It's much more than just making sure that the internet's working in the district. But we support all departments and all groups as much as we can. And now that responsibility is doubled with both in-person and remote work taking place. While I'm not ecstatic about an 87.3% response time on SLA, it's a realistic SLA based on the volume and capacity of work that we were doing during this time. Usually you'd be looking for that number to be over 95 to 97%. However, I will note that of the tickets that we had in that 27,000 period, the first week of online registration was close to a third of all the tickets that we received during that time. So it was a very large swath of support at that period. I want to make sure the district community knows that we continue to provide support for all staff, all students and families who are working in person and remote, and including any of the live remote sessions that we can do. It may take a little bit longer than the time that we would do normally when we're in buildings, but know that every question matters to us and we will get to all questions and be able to support all individuals in our district. Next slide, please. Zoom has been the hot topic, whether you're in a school district, in a corporation, or where you work. Since we have gone into, in the last 30 days, We've done 54,000 Zoom meetings within our district, and that number I checked just before this meeting is actually up to 62 million Zoom meeting minutes over the last 30 days. I just want to make sure that's very clear that it's 60 million meeting minutes over the last 30 days. At the end of a Zoom meeting, individuals get a thumbs up or a thumbs down indicator, and they say whether or not it was a good meeting or a bad meeting for connection, not necessarily they liked the content or didn't like the content. The satisfaction ranges went anywhere from 98% all the way up to, which is on more of the regular, 99.99%. And that's a very high percentage rate of satisfaction with connectivity within the district. And at any given time during the day of a traditional school day, we have roughly 1,500 concurrent Zoom meetings going on at the exact same time. And that is a massive amount of connectivity. So much so that we may or may not have taken down one of the internet providers in the area the first day we went to online learning, knowing how much traffic we were putting into the network at that given time. We have taken a number of steps I wanted to address, and I know it's not on the slide in the text, but taken a number of steps for Zoom security, and we have a couple more steps to come to of how we're supporting teachers and staff and students about Zoom protections for security. Part of this is we have students who are being creative. Part of this is that we have other measures that we can place into the system to make sure to secure it even further. And we have upcoming efforts in the next few days that will add into the Zoom list. But I encourage parents and families who would like to know more about what we're doing for Zoom security to visit the district website. And there's an article that goes through what we're doing for Zoom sessions and overall security. Our staff and students have been very busy on Google with Google Drive, creating 110,000 new documents daily, new resources daily. And there's on average, and this is a question of a previous annual update, so I wanted to make sure and share this. I think, Mark, you had asked this before, is we have 12,000 Google Classrooms that are active each day. And that activity means there's interactions between staff or teachers and students, and there's materials going back and forth within those services. We did also reroute all fax machines and telephone numbers in the district to ring to a central number and then have intake. So we listened to every single voicemail that came in from every district main building number and routed those to respective groups and answering questions that were received. So it was a very busy time, and it was very reminiscent. I can't remember her name, but plugging in the phones back and forth of trying to connect people as we go through. It was a very interesting experience. I want to say it's Gilda Radner, but I don't think it is. Michael will know the answer, I'm sure. Next page, please. So what's next, right? So all of that took place, and a lot of our priorities that we had were paused because we needed to focus our energies on making sure the district could connect and our SIS was implemented, and we had a safe and secure and stable environment. Our next step is to continue our migration to Microsoft Teams, which will provide us with instant messaging capabilities, also afford staff the ability to use their district telephone number from home or outside of the district, as well as our migration to OneDrive, which will make your private drive files and team or shared drive files available outside of the district on demand, rather than needing to be in the district to sync those files back and forth. We're going to continue our evolution and journey with Synergy. We, again, as I mentioned previously, we know that training is important. It's something that I talked about as our key piece of how we were going to move forward. One of the things we're doing right now is building Synergy support for just-in-time assistance, meaning doing 2 to 3 minute nuggets of material that are important for individuals. As an example, how do I add an assignment into my gradebook? How do I sync my Google Classroom? While we put together a large resource, we realize it's important to give people bite-sized chunks that they can digest. And we're learning each day. I want to make sure it's clear that while we ask our students to learn something new each day and to experience the wow that's happening now, to use Daniel Tiger, which is a popular phrase in our household, we are learning each day from parents, from students, from teachers and our staff and those that we work with, and are making changes and updating things as we learn. And that's an important attribute I just wanted for us to acknowledge. And our support center is continuing to make ongoing improvements for new case types and resources to better support the district. And lastly, we'll be revisiting a lot of our deferred projects that were in buildings that we didn't necessarily have access to at the time, but we'll begin continuing that work as we move forward. Next slide, please. I think that perfect. Again, I just wanted to say thank you to not only the technology services team, which has been instrumental in this effort, but also a number of individuals within our district that I could go on for time for, but knowing that it's 10:15, I want to make sure to be respectful of folks' time. So thank you to each of you and the Board of Education, as well as to our cabinet, as well as to teachers and staff, parents and students in the district. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam. Comments and questions?
So a quick question. First of all, as an engineer and a certified project manager, I greatly appreciate all of the work and enormity. I have great admiration for your team and everything you've done. So thank you so much. With the 250 hotspots, I thought we had more requests than that volume. Have we been able to support all of the families that needed equipment or service to have their internet connection?
Lori, that's a great question. Thank you so much. We did have a much larger number than that, but the 250 devices that we have for hotspots, those will be issuing out. We also have the DuPage County relationship that we'll be sharing more information out with, that will meet a lot of the remainder of the folks that had put in requests for hotspot or internet connectivity. We also are going to do one more follow-up with families just to confirm, was this a want, a nice to have, or a need? Because we had a number of folks who wanted to have another connection because they had so many devices that were connected at the same time versus the need within their household and not having connectivity. So again, we just want to make sure that we're providing resources to families that need it. And so we'll be doing a follow-up on that piece too. Thank you for the question.
Other questions, Susan?
So Adam, this may be, I'm not sure if this is going to be for you, for Dr. Talley. I thought that we had been able to cover everybody that had a need. If we weren't, what were we doing? What have we been doing to help those families get access to their meet their educational daily needs?
Dr. Talley, do you mind if I respond to that, or would you like to respond to it?
Go ahead, Adam.
Sure. I genuinely feel, looking at the data based on what we have for hotspots available in our pool, as well as the information available from DuPage County, I think we'll be able to meet all of the need that's currently within our system. It's a matter of the distribution as well as some of the criteria for the programs. And so we'll have to have larger conversations this week about the DuPage County program has a set of requirements that families will need to meet in order to qualify for those efforts. And so what we want to do as a district is make sure that we're supporting families and not putting them in the spot where they have to meet qualifications. So for families that might not qualify for one program, we have an alternative option available for them. So again, we want to make sure we're serving as many people as possible with the devices that we have.
Thank you for that. So Dr. Talley, if we have families whose needs have not been able to have been met yet, what have we been doing for them?
So we're not aware of any families at this point in time, but as Adam mentioned, we did ask for, from the DuPage County, approximately 900 hotspots that we'd be able to give out. But we have been very careful in our process when we did registration of students. That was one of the questions that came forward. And I do want to reiterate something that Adam mentioned with regards to, do people have a hotspot or do they not have a hotspot? Or let me rephrase that. Do they have Wi-Fi or do they not have Wi-Fi? Because what we want to be very careful about is that we ensure that everyone had Wi-Fi. But anyone who hasn't had an issue should have let us know, and then we would have been working with them to ensure that they had access to some type of available device. But again, we're not aware of any at this point in time.
Thank you.
Others? Hearing none. Thank you, Adam. And by the way, so you can sleep at night, the woman was Lily Tomlin. One ringy dingy, two ringy dingies.
Yeah, Ernestine. Ernestine.
I know who to call for my phone a friend, Mike. Thank you.
And with that, we move on. And I'm just going to combine the legislative advocacy update and the Board of Education update together. LEND, the Legislative Education Network of DuPage, has a meeting scheduled for Friday. They will be discussing how districts have been implementing plans, and board members and superintendents will be sharing plans, successes, and challenges at that meeting. As we get information, I will share that with you. And also, we all have received from the Illinois Association of School Boards their most recent updated resolutions and belief statements. As a preview, we will be discussing those, whether we're going to accept those or not, at our next board meeting. So I'm encouraging you to read them now, because oftentimes they're meaty and you need to discern and kind of work through those. So please take a look at those resolutions and belief statements in order that we can act in a kind of coherent manner there with those statements.
Mr. Razak?
Yes.
If that's the process you want to follow, I'm fine with that. I know in the past, we've either had an initial discussion, or board members send me questions and I ask those to our DuPage representative that's on the resolutions committee if we need any clarifications. I don't know if you've read through some of those yet or not, but I don't know if you wanted me to still follow that, or if you just want to have a conversation on October 5th and we may not need further clarification. I'll kind of take your direction on that, but I know we've done it a little differently in the past. So
thanks, Mark, for reminding me. I have no problem. If there's some issues or needs clarification, we can contact Mark, and he does have contacts with people at IASB to get any kind of clarification that's needed. So that's more than appropriate.
The only thing, if we do that and we want the answers to those questions by the October 5th meeting, I would probably need to have everybody have questions to me individually, probably no later than this coming Sunday. That would give me a week to get answers. So I can remind people in an email.
And I think we will have two meetings. I think the delegate assembly, excuse me, is meeting in early November.
Yeah.
So we will have two meetings to perhaps work through those.
Actually, we have three. So the vote's not taking place until November 14th, and we've got a October 5th meeting, October 19th meeting, and a November 2nd meeting. So we actually have plenty of time.
Okay, great. Maybe we can get questions to you and then move it to the second meeting in October and still have time for November.
Yeah.
That seems to make sense.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions from the board? With that, I need a motion to adjourn. Please identify yourself as you make your motion or second.
Motion to adjourn. Justin.
Natasha, second.
Go.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.